Hello everyone, welcome to the Paranormal M channel. I'm so excited to be here and share my paranormal experiences with you. Been having trouble sleeping lately? Come on in, we've got you. And don't hesitate to send us your own paranormal stories. Also, have you subscribed and turned on notifications yet? If not, you might miss our newest videos. Now get comfy, and let's dive into today's paranormal experiences. So, I don't really talk about this stuff out loud very often, because if I hadn't lived through it, I'd probably be the guy rolling his eyes and going, yeah, okay, sure you did. But I did. And the older I get, the more I realize how weirdly clear these memories still are, like they're pinned to a timeline in my head. Alright, first one. I was maybe 4 years old, give or take. A little kid living with my parents in this quiet neighborhood in western Massachusetts. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and the houses weren't big, but they felt big when you were tiny. Our house had 3 levels, a basement that always smelled a little damp, a main floor, and then the upstairs where the bedrooms were. You'd walk in the front door, and the living room was right there on the right, kitchen on the left, and the stairs straight ahead like an invitation. Upstairs, there were 2 bedrooms. My parents had the one on the left, and I had the one on the right. And my room, at least in my kid brain, was enormous. The thing I remember most is the closet. Just a normal closet. Except it wasn't. It had that old pull-string light bulb inside, one of those cords you yank to turn it on and off. But above the closet was this weird little door, like a hatch, leading into this attic-ish space above my room. Nobody ever used it. Not once. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, feels off. Anyway, one afternoon I'm on the floor in front of the open closet, absolutely surrounded by kid chaos. I had this red plastic bin full of Legos and random toy junk, little action figures, loose wheels, half a dinosaur, all the important stuff. I also had crayons, paper, and some clay I'd been turning into terrible snakes. My dad had been doodling these perfect little 3D boxes around that time, like cubes, and it had become my personal mystery of the universe. I was obsessed with figuring out how he did the back lines. So picture this, a grubby-faced kid sitting cross-legged, aggressively stabbing a piece of paper with a crayon, trying to force the back of a cube to exist through sheer determination. And then I hear a little sound from inside the closet. I look up, and that pull string for the light is gently swaying side to side. My first thought is basically, weird. And then I go right back to my cube mission. A few seconds later, another sound. This time, the string isn't gently swaying. It's whipping around like somebody's flicking it. And I remember, very distinctly, having this completely unserious child reaction of, adults are always doing weird things, whatever. Then it changes again. The cord goes totally still. And then it starts getting yanked straight down like someone's pulling it, over and over, clicking the light on and off. On, off, on, off. And then the closet door swings shut by itself. And I just stared at it for a moment. And I swear to you, I had this calm little thought like, never seen that before. And then I went right back to stabbing my paper. I know. In hindsight, I'm like, excuse me? How was I not screaming? But I was 4. My brain filed it under mystery grown-up mechanics and moved on. Now, the second thing in that room wasn't a one-time event. It was a night thing, like a recurring thing. My bed was in the far corner of the room, and near the bedroom door there was a window. Every night, I'd lie on my side facing that window while I drifted off. And almost every night, there was this pale bluish glow there. And here's the part that sounds the most ridiculous. The glow would sort of become whatever I imagined. At that age, I was obsessed with giant robots. There was this movie I loved, and I kept picturing this towering metal figure out in the distance. In the bluish window mist, it would look like the robot was way out there, semi-transparent, tinted blue, slowly walking toward the house, but never actually getting closer. And I'd watch it until I fell asleep, night after night. It never felt threatening. It was just strange, almost comforting in a weird way. My parents said they'd had odd moments in that house too, but I'm sticking to what I personally saw and heard. Okay, fast forward about a decade. I'm around 14, and by then my family had moved down south, closer to Virginia, but we came back up to Massachusetts for the holidays to visit my grandmother, Marjorie. She lived in this cozy apartment building, nothing fancy, but warm and familiar. I'd stayed there a bunch as a kid and never had anything weird happen. That night, everyone's deciding sleeping arrangements, and they tell me to take the couch in the living room. Fine, whatever. Teen me is just happy nobody is making me share a bed with a snoring relative. So it's late, like 1 or 2 in the mummer, and the apartment is pitch black. Totally silent except for the little hum of the building. I'm lying on the couch with my handheld game system, playing this old Pokemon game, doing one of those repetitive little grinding tasks you only have the patience for when you're 14. I'm half annoyed, half locked in, pressing buttons like it's my job. And then, out of nowhere, I get this sharp awareness. It's really dark in here. Not scared dark, just suddenly aware of it. And the thought didn't feel like it came naturally. It felt injected, like someone nudged my attention. And the instant that thought lands, I hear something above me, on the ceiling. It's muffled at first, like someone talking through a wall, except it doesn't sound like a neighbor. It sounds like it's in the room with me, like a man murmuring without stopping, low, rapid, relentless. I freeze and stare upward like, what is that? And the murmuring gets louder, clearer, and then I realize, no joke, the sound is repeating my thoughts. Not in a crisp voice, in this messy, whispery mumble, like it's chewing the words up. If I thought cat, it would go, cat, 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 cat. If I thought something stupid, it would latch onto that too, immediately, like a mirror with a mouth. I'm trying to stay cool, because I'm a teenager and pride is a powerful force, so I do this very casual move where I pull the blanket up and go, I'm not scared, I'm just getting comfortable. I'm cold. Meanwhile, my brain is going a mile a minute. To drown it out, I crank the game volume up and press the speaker close to my face. I even switch areas in the game to get louder music, like that's going to save me. It doesn't, because the whispering starts moving. Not physically like footsteps, but the sound shifts from the ceiling, down, like it's descending toward me. And it gets louder and louder until it's basically right next to my head, like a real person leaning in and whispering non-stop. And at first, this is so embarrassing. I actually try to make it say ridiculous stuff on purpose, because my teenage brain is like, oh, it's a thought parrot? Watch this. So I think the dumbest, most inappropriate words I can, and it starts mumbling them, and for like 30 seconds it's almost funny, because it will not stop. It doesn't pause. It doesn't breathe. It's just relentless. And the moment I start feeling fear, my thoughts turn into pure panic. So the whisper turns into pure panic too. It's like, what is that? What is that? It's right here. It's right here. Stop, stop, stop. And it's echoing it back in that ugly, whispery loop, getting tighter and louder and closer. Something in me snaps into fight or flight. And I pick fight. I throw the blanket off like I'm squaring up with the darkness, and I swing my fist straight toward where the sound is. And instantly, silence. Gone. Just gone. Like someone hit a switch. I I sat there breathing hard in the dark, listening for it to come back, but it didn't. The apartment was normal again. Quiet. Still. That was the last time anything like that ever happened to me. I'm in my late 20s now, and I'm way more skeptical than I used to be. I can rationalize a lot. Sleep stuff, stress, your brain doing strange things in the dark. But I'll never forget those 2 moments. The closet light that moved like it had hands, and the whisper in my grandmother's apartment that sounded like it knew exactly what was inside my head. So I went to see my mom today, and I'm planning to stay the whole weekend. We were sitting together later in the evening. Tea, blankets, that quiet end-of-day kind of calm. And she tells me she's had something, honestly, really strange happen this morning. At first, she didn't even want to say it out loud. She kept pausing, like, "You're going to think I've lost it." And I swear, she looked genuinely upset, like she was embarrassed to even bring it up. But eventually she took a breath and told me. And here's the thing. This isn't the first weird experience we've had around that apartment. Years ago, back when I still lived there, we both saw these odd lights outside very early in the morning, like a floating little light sphere, kind of. And on totally separate mornings, weeks apart, we each heard footsteps moving through the hallway when no one else was there. Same time of day, too. Neither of us told the other until later, which somehow made it creepier. Anyway, this morning is what really got her. She woke up before sunrise, still dim outside, that gray-blue darkness when morning's coming but hasn't arrived yet. The sunlight wasn't even on her side of the house yet. She turned over toward her pillow, this old pillow she's had forever, like more than a decade, and she froze. Because it was glowing. Not like, "I think I see something," glowing. Like actually glowing. She said it looked as if there were dozens of fireflies trapped inside the pillowcase, all clustered together into one big, warm, yellow ball of light. And she just stared at it, trying to make her brain catch up. Then she did what anyone would do. She touched it, just to check if it was some trick of her eyes. And the second her fingers pressed into the pillow, the light sort of shifted, like it slid away from her touch. And that big glow split into a few smaller round lights, little orbs almost, moving aside as if they were making room. And then, just like that, it stopped. No fading, no slow dimming, just gone. My mom got up immediately and went into full investigation mode. She took the pillow to the bathroom, turned on the light, checked the seams, opened the case, shook it, squeezed it, even turned the bathroom light off to see if it would happen again. She said she felt ridiculous, but also terrified. Like, what do you do when your pillow behaves like it's alive? I tried thinking logically too. Static electricity crossed my mind because synthetic fabric can do weird things. But from what I've read, static usually looks like tiny bluish specks, and you have to rub the fabric to make it happen. This sounded different. It sounded deliberate. So she goes back into her bedroom, still unsettled, and decides she needs air. She opens the window. And that's when the second thing happens. Out in the sky, not high like a star, and not far away like a plane, there's this glowing round object. She guessed it was maybe a kilometer or two away, low enough that it didn't feel astronomical. And it wasn't a steady light either. She described it as shimmering, pink and gold and hints of green, like looking into a little kaleidoscope that's somehow hanging in the air. She stood there watching it for maybe half a minute, completely stunned. She said it drifted slightly, like it was gliding or bobbing, not shooting across the sky. Then she glanced away for a second, just a reflex, like her mind needed a break. And when she looked back, it had shrunk, like it was pulling farther into the distance. And then it vanished. No streak, no fade into clouds, nothing. Just gone. When she told me, she started crying. Not dramatic crying, more like the kind where you're frustrated and scared and you don't know how to explain something without sounding insane. She kept saying, "I swear to you, I'm not making this up." And then she said something that really stuck with me. She had this strong feeling that the thing in the sky might have shined onto the pillow somehow, like the two events weren't separate. They happened within maybe 20 or 30 minutes of each other, and in her gut, it felt connected. I don't know what to make of it. I've heard plenty of strange stories, but nothing quite like this. Not the firefly glowing pillow, not the kaleidoscope light in the sky, and definitely not both in the same morning. And honestly, I'm staying the weekend, but I'm not sure I'll sleep as easily as I thought I would. So, I want to start by painting you a picture, because this whole thing only makes sense if you can see where it happened. I grew up in this little Midwestern town where people actually knew each other. Like, knew each other. Families lived close. Neighbors waved. If someone's porch light was out, somebody mentioned it. It was that kind of place. Our house sat halfway down a quiet block. My grandparents, Nana and Grandpa Ron, lived right on the corner nearest us. And behind them, kind of tucked to the side on the cross street, lived this older woman named Marjorie. Between our three houses, all the backyards basically touched. The only thing separating ours was this fenced-off section because we had a small above-ground pool. If I wanted to get from our back door to Marjorie's place, I'd slip outside, cut through my grandparents' yard, and follow the outside of our pool fence until I reached this little wooden garden arch. You stepped under that arch and, boom, you were in Marjorie's backyard. And when I was little, Marjorie was my best friend. She'd been widowed long before I ever knew her, lived alone, and had grown kids I barely saw. But she and I, we were inseparable. We planted flowers together, made little craft projects, and my favorite thing was sitting on her couch while she had me read the comics from the newspaper out loud. It drove my mom, Denise, absolutely nuts, because I'd be reading way earlier than she expected, but honestly, I give Marjorie credit for how comfortable I became with reading. Everything felt safe back then. Peaceful. Quiet. No weird history, no scary rumors, nothing like that. And then, one summer afternoon when I was about 12, something happened that split my life into a before and after. It was the middle of summer, hot enough that the air felt thick. We didn't have AC, so my mom and I were at the kitchen table with the window open, trying to steal whatever breeze we could get. She was flipping through a magazine. I was reading a book. Our back door was right there in the kitchen. My older brother, Ethan, he was around 14, had been outside mowing Marjorie's backyard as a favor. And then the back door opened. I looked up expecting him to stomp in sweaty and annoyed, like usual. But he came in, crying. Not full-on bawling at first, more like that exhausted, defeated kind of whimpering people do when they're trying not to break down. He was pale, like ghost pale, and he just stood in the doorway like he didn't know what room he was in. My mom turned around fast, chair scraping. "What's wrong?" she said, already moving. Ethan's eyes were wide, his whole body trembling, and he just stared at us like he'd run straight out of a nightmare and didn't know if he was safe yet. My mom reached him and wrapped him up, and then the sobbing really started. He tried to talk, but it came out in this frantic rush. Voices, shadows, footsteps, something moving around him even though no one was there. I couldn't catch every detail because it was so panicked and fast, but the words that did land made my stomach tighten. My mom gave me this quick look, like something's wrong, and half-guided, half-carried Ethan into the living room, still holding him. I honestly think she was trying to figure out if he was overheating, like heat stroke or something. But me? I was 12. It was bright outside. Middle of the day. Part of me was shaken by how Ethan was, but another part of me was like, no way. Not in our backyard. Not in full daylight. So I did the dumbest, brave thing a 12-year-old can do. I walked right out the back door. I took the little path into my grandparents' yard, turned left, followed the fence line, and stepped under the garden arch into Marjorie's backyard. And the second I crossed under it, I got hit with nausea so hard it almost dropped me, and the air changed. It felt heavier, dense, thick, like I was walking into water, and at the same time it felt charged, electrified. The only comparison I've ever had for it is standing too close to a TV with static, like the whole atmosphere is buzzing and prickling and alive. Then I heard footsteps. At first, they were soft, like distant thumps, but I could feel them too, like vibration through the ground. And then there was this faint laughter, this awful, cliché kind of laughter, like someone mocking you, but it wasn't coming from one spot. It felt like it was in the treetops, in the air itself, everywhere at once. And shadows started moving. Not like a person shadow, more like patches of darkness slipping at the edge of my vision. I'd catch one in my peripheral sight, turn to focus, and it would vanish. Except it kept happening, over and over, like something was circling just outside my ability to look straight at it. I stood up a little more, still holding my stomach. The footsteps got heavier, louder, closer, like something massive was running in circles around me, even though I couldn't see anything. The laughter rose with it until it wasn't laughter anymore. It was this shrieking, taunting sound that made my skin crawl. And the trees started shaking. These were huge old oaks, thick trunks, tall, solid, the kind that don't move unless there's a real storm. But they were rattling from trunk to treetop like something invisible was yanking them. There was no wind. At that point, my brain basically screamed, "Leave! Now!" I forced myself upright and ran back toward the arch, and as I crossed through it, I caught shadow movement along the fence line. Closer, sharper, more defined. I turned my head for half a second, just a half second, and I saw them. 4 tall figures, pure black. No transparency, no details, just voids shaped like something standing upright. Cloaked looking, too tall to be normal. 7, maybe 8 feet. I couldn't see faces, but I knew they were looking at me the way you can feel eyes on you in a dark room. They glided along the ground, keeping pace from about 20 feet away. And then, one by one, they just disappeared. Not behind anything, not into shadows, just gone. I sprinted back to the house, flung the back door open, and practically crashed into the kitchen. My mom was there again, and I started spilling everything. Nausea, footsteps, the air, the laughter, the trees, the tall figures. My words coming out just as fast as Ethan's had. She held up her hand and told me to lower my voice. And then, quietly, she listened, all the way through. When I finished, she looked at me very seriously and said, "Don't tell your brother. He's already shaken. He doesn't need more." So, that was that day. A year later we moved. New town, more land, different house. Nothing about the move had anything to do with what happened. Ethan never experienced anything again. Neither did my parents. Neither did my other siblings. But for me, it followed. That static, electrified air, the shifting shadows, it started happening again, randomly at first, then more often. Eventually it was weekly, sometimes more. Daytime, nighttime, alone, sometimes even with other people nearby, and nobody else ever seemed to notice. It eventually stopped being terrifying in the moment, because once something becomes common, your brain gets tired of screaming. But the unease never left. It was like having the constant sense that you're in the same room as someone dangerous, except someone was a cluster of moving, shapeless shadows that came and went, and when they were near, the whole world felt charged and wrong. And then something stranger happened. I realized I could trigger it. After that, it stopped being spontaneous most of the time. I could leave it alone for weeks, then test it just to see if it still worked, then back off again. I don't even know how each episode ended, honestly. I think I just walked away, changed rooms, got distracted, like it was bound to whatever space I was in. Until one night, It didn't feel like I called it. It felt like it forced its way in. At our new place, we had a big property with a few outbuildings. One of them became this hangout spot, kind of a clubhouse, where we could be loud and nobody cared. I played guitar, so I spent a lot of time out there because I could crank an amp without anyone yelling at me. One night, late, like edging into early morning, I was out there playing for hours. I'd recently gotten a new amplifier, and I was obsessed with it. At some point, I noticed the volume knob felt loose, like it kept creeping down on its own. It was irritating, so I turned it all the way up and started playing hard, fast, half to blow off steam, half because I wanted to catch the knob in the act. I leaned forward, eyes fixed on it, and right in front of me, that knob twisted straight down to 0. The amp went dead silent, and the moment it did, the air exploded with that electric pressure, stronger than I'd ever felt it, like the room had been filled with charged mist. I sat up and realized the space was full of them. Not 10, not a handful, more like 50. Shadows gliding everywhere, appearing and melting out of existence like something was erasing and redrawing them in different places. And what scared me most was how uninterested they seemed. Like I wasn't the main event. Like I was just familiar. I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen in my chair. Then something shifted to my left. Bigger movement, heavier. I turned and saw one shape on the wall that was clearer than anything I'd ever seen. A spider. Not a normal spider. A huge one, the size of a crib mattress. Solid black like the others, but the outline was unmistakable. And even though I know spiders don't move like this, the head or front of it rotated toward me, like it had noticed me. And then it dropped. Straight down from the wall to the floor, disappearing behind a stack of boxes. That was it. I bolted. I ran out of that building so fast I nearly tripped, and as I sprinted uphill toward the house, for the first time, I could feel it pursuing me. Not just around me, but in my head. Like something closing in from the edges of my thoughts, trying to swallow the space I was in. I got inside, raced to my bedroom, dove onto my bed face first, shoved my face into a pillow, and yanked my blanket over my head like a little kid. And I could feel the darkness pressing into the room. I didn't know what else to do. So I prayed. Not a polite prayer, not a calm one, a desperate one, over and over. Please, please make this stop. I don't want this anymore. Please. And then, under the blanket, eyes squeezed shut, I felt light. Not like imagination light, like actual brightness coming through my eyelids. It startled me so much I sat up and looked around, searching for the source. Nothing. The room was dark. But the second I ducked back down and started praying again, that light came back. And it kept happening. Dark pressure returning when I stopped, the light swelling when I prayed. At some point I realized, if the darkness could return, that meant it was also retreating. So I prayed harder, like I was hanging onto a rope. The light built and built until it felt like it should be blinding, except it didn't hurt. It was warm, comforting warm, the kind that makes you feel safe in your bones. And with it came this soft roaring sound, gentle but huge, like wind through a massive space. Then, suddenly, it cut off. Dark again. But the wrong darkness was gone. No heaviness, no pursuing pressure, no fear. Just calm. When I came out, my oldest brother was in the hall waiting, half asleep and annoyed. He was like, "Dude, seriously? You okay?" And I said something totally normal, like, "Yeah, I just had to take a massive crap." But inside, I felt clean, like I'd never felt better in my life. And that was the last time. After that night, the static atmosphere stopped. The shadows stopped. The feeling of being watched stopped. Like whatever had been clinging to me, Whether it was real, psychological, spiritual, I don't even know. Whatever it was done. And I know this is a long story. I've never told it quite like this before. But if I'm being honest, I still remember exactly what that garden arch felt like a doorway you can't see until you step through it. Okay, so I need to tell you what's been going on because I'm at this weird point where I don't know if I'm overreacting or if I'm underreacting. So the house next door to me, it's been empty forever, like years. It's this huge, creaky old mansion with the kind of porch you can picture in an old photograph. A few different owners have bought it in a short span, 3, I think. And every single time, they start renovations and then just stop, mid-project. Boards in the yard, tarps half on, windows covered, and then nothing. No moving truck, no, finally, someone's living there. Just silence. And then, maybe 5-ish weeks ago, I started noticing lights. Not normal, someone's home lights. I mean, lights turning on late, always after 1 a.m. And I'm awake then because I work from home and my schedule is basically nocturnal. The first time I saw it, I did the rational thing. Maybe the owners came by. Maybe they needed to grab something. But there were no cars, no headlights, no doors opening. Just a glow in an upstairs room, like someone flipped a switch and walked away. The second time, it happened even later, like 2:15, 2:30, and still no cars. So I called the cops because, okay, fine, maybe someone broke in. Squatters, bored teenagers, whatever. And honestly, I love old buildings. I have a soft spot for them. The idea of people trashing that place for fun made my stomach twist. The officers came out, walked the property, knocked, shined flashlights in windows. Nothing. No broken doors, no smashed windows, no obvious way in. And they told me they couldn't enter without permission unless there was clear evidence of a break-in. So they left. It happened again a couple nights later. Same deal. I called again. Same routine, same outcome. And I could tell, by the way they looked at me, that they were already filing me away in their minds as the neighbor who calls about nothing. So I decided the next time it happened, I would record it. Just proof. Something solid. 4 nights went by, and I started thinking maybe it stopped. And then one night, I was in my kitchen making the saddest meal imaginable. Heated up garlic bread and a frozen pizza, and I had my timer set. I remember the exact time because the timer went off at 3:07 a.m. I walked over to the oven, and through my kitchen window, I saw the basement lights on next door. So I grabbed my phone and started recording. And the second I hit record, the light in their kitchen snapped on, the window facing my direction. And at that exact moment, the basement light clicked off, like it was coordinated. Like it noticed me. And then it got wrong. Lights started flashing on and off in different parts of the house. Kitchen, front room, upstairs hallway, attic window, basement again. Like someone was hopping around rooms at superhuman speed. Except it wasn't one light at a time. It was overlapping. Lights flipping in totally different levels of the house almost simultaneously. Like there would need to be a person in each room, all playing some stupid synchronized game. It didn't feel like someone's inside. It felt like the house itself was doing it. So I called 911 again. The cops showed up and, of course, by the time they arrived, everything was dark, quiet, like nothing had happened. They gave me that look. You know the one, the polite one that says, "Sure, okay," while their brain is already halfway back to their car. So I told them, I recorded it. I pulled out my phone, hit play, and the video wouldn't open. And the officers didn't even try to hide their doubt. They did their little walk around again and left. And I swear to you, Swear, the minute they pulled away, the attic light flicked on once. Just a single blink, like a smirking little, "Nice try." After that, I stopped calling the police. I'm not trying to become the neighborhood joke, but the lights kept happening, and every time I tried to record, phone, tablet, even my old backup device I keep in a drawer, something went wrong. The photo wouldn't save. The video would freeze. A black screen, a corrupted file, every single time. Then 3 nights ago, I said something I shouldn't have said. I'd been running on fumes and I wasn't working that night. I was exhausted, like bone-deep exhausted, so I decided I'd just watch TV on the couch until I drifted off. Before I settled in, I went into the kitchen to turn off the little light above my fish tank. I have a betta fish, and I always say goodnight to him like a lunatic. So I said, "Good night, Captain," because that's what I named him. And then, half joking, half just being dumb, I looked out the window toward the mansion and I went, "Good night, whoever you are." Like, I didn't even say ghost. I didn't want to give it that much. I was trying to be casual, flippant, like you talk to an empty room. And right after I said it, the living room light in that mansion snapped on. But here's the thing. It wasn't the usual warm white glow I'd seen before. It was red. Not, "Maybe the shade is weird." Not, "Maybe my eyes are tired." Red. Like someone put a red bulb in there on purpose. It held for maybe a second, long enough for my whole body to go cold, and then it shut off. And I just whispered, "Nope," like I was declining a party invitation. And I walked straight back to my couch and laid down like pretending hard enough could erase reality. About 15 minutes later, my cat, Miso, who'd been curled up on my stomach, shot upright like she got electrocuted. She hissed. A real, ugly hiss. And then she bolted out of the room like something chased her. And as soon as I sat up, I heard my front doorknob jiggle. Not a bump. Not the house settling. The unmistakable sound of someone trying the knob. Like a hand testing it. Once. Twice. I flew to the door, heart pounding, and looked through the peephole. No one. I checked the windows, the yard, the sidewalk, the street. Nothing. Nobody. And that's the part that's messing with me most. Because the lights were creepy, sure, but they were at a distance. They were a mystery I could squint at and call weird. But the doorknob? That was here. That was my space. Now I'm barely sleeping. And when I do, I get nightmares. Really vivid ones. The kind where you wake up more tired than when you went to bed. And I keep replaying it, over and over. That red light, my cat hissing, the doorknob turning. And I keep thinking, did I invite something? Did acknowledging it, even lightly, make it feel like it could come closer? So I don't know what to do now. Do I ignore it completely and act like it's not happening? Do I try to figure out what it is and risk making it worse by paying attention? And how do you even confirm something is supernatural without spiraling into paranoia? Because I'll be honest with you, part of me still wants a normal explanation. A wiring issue, a prank, a squatter with a weird obsession with light switches. But the other part of me, the part that heard my doorknob move in the dark, can't shake the feeling that something heard me. And it answered. So, this happened to me a few years back, and I almost never bring it up. Not because I've forgotten it, trust me, I haven't, but because it sounds like something you'd make up for attention. And I'm not asking you to believe me, okay? I'm just telling you because it still sits on my chest sometimes, like a weight. Back then, I was dating this guy named Ethan, and we were hanging out with our friend Drew. Ethan and Drew were those super logical, prove it or it's not real types. Like, they'd roll their eyes at astrology, anything paranormal, all of it. Meanwhile, I've always been the person who's like, hey, maybe we don't mess with things we don't understand. Anyway, it was late, around 10 p.m., and we got the bright idea to drive out to the beach. And someone, Drew, I think, decides it would be fun to make a homemade spirit board. Real arts and crafts energy. Cardboard, marker, a little cup as the planchette. The whole thing. And before you assume it, no, we weren't drunk. No drugs, nothing. Just 3 bored people who thought the ocean at night would be a vibe. I remember sitting there and being the only one not laughing. I kept saying, if you're going to do this, you have to take it seriously. They were clowning, asking dumb questions, trying to spook each other. We get to the beach. It's dark and windy, and the waves sound louder than normal, like the whole shoreline is breathing. I did the whole little, okay, we're opening this thing, calling the corners, setting the intention, whatever you want to call it. We sat on a blanket, the cup in the middle, our fingers barely touching it. For the first 20 minutes, nothing. It was exactly what they expected, me being dramatic over cardboard. Then Ethan asks, half joking, is anyone here with us? And I swear to you, the cup slid so fast it didn't even feel like a slow push. It just shot across the letters and stopped right on yes. All 3 of us froze. Like the air went tight. Even the ocean sounded farther away for a second. Ethan's face changed immediately. No more smirking. Drew did that thing where people laugh when they're scared, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It was sharp, too loud, like it was coming out of him without permission. I was like, nope, we're done. I tried to end it right there. I started saying, goodbye, goodbye, and I moved the cup toward the edge like you're supposed to. I tried to close it. I wanted it shut. But the feeling didn't stop. And then things got wrong. Drew starts laughing harder, like it's building, and Ethan suddenly stands up and starts pulling off his hoodie and his shoes, like he's on autopilot. He looks at the water and goes, really calmly, I'm going in. And I'm like, Ethan, what are you doing? Because it was cold, like truly cold, and it was late enough that the beach had emptied out hours ago. The only lights were distant street lamps, and the moon was barely doing anything. He doesn't look at me like my boyfriend. He looks through me, blank. And he just repeats, I'm going in. I'm begging him, like, actually begging. I'm crying and grabbing his arm, trying to hold him back, and he's still walking toward the water like I'm not even there. Meanwhile, Drew is still laughing, but now he's shouting that his name is Pauline, over and over, like he's announcing it to the beach, like he wants someone to hear him. Ethan and I are terrified at this point. We're trying to get Drew to come back with us, and he's bouncing between laughing and yelling that name. We basically drag him up the wooden steps off the sand, back toward the parking lot. We get him to the car, and then, out of nowhere, he locks onto something across the road. A shadow moving by the dunes. A coyote. Not even close. And Drew bolts after it. When I tell you I've never seen someone move like that, listen, I know how it sounds. It wasn't, oh, he ran fast. It was like his body was doing something it shouldn't be able to do. Long, insane strides, like panic had turned into fuel. Ethan and I catch up just enough to yank him back and basically shove him into the back seat. We're shaking. I'm trying not to hyperventilate. On the drive back, we pass this small chapel, not a big church, just one of those little roadside ones. and Drew suddenly sits up straight and starts making sounds that aren't words. Not English, not anything I recognized. It sounded like a burst of language without meaning, but with a rhythm, like chanting almost. Ethan keeps glancing at me like, what do we do? And I'm just staring straight ahead thinking, we messed up, we messed up, we messed up. We get to Ethan's place, and I hate admitting this, but we panicked. We ran inside and slammed the door behind us. And Drew was outside pulling at the handle, clawing at the wood. The next day, when Ethan checked the door, there were literal scratch marks, like someone had dragged their nails down it hard enough to leave grooves. That night, I called my friend Maya, because Maya is the kind of person who actually knows things. Like, she studied spiritual stuff, protection rituals, the whole deal. She didn't laugh when I told her. She got very quiet and told me to put the phone near Drew. And then Maya said a word. She said it was from the Cree language. Just one word. Short. Firm. The second Maya said it, Drew's whole body jolted like he'd been punched from the inside. He threw up, not normal sick, like sudden violent vomiting. And then he started sobbing. Real sobbing. The kind where you can't breathe between cries. And he just kept saying, "What happened? What happened to me?" Like he didn't remember. Like he'd woken up somewhere he didn't recognize. After that, things calmed down. Not immediately, but enough that we could function again. We didn't touch the board. We didn't talk about it much. We just tried to pretend we could outrun it by not naming it. But here's the part that still messes with me. The next day we stop for food, some drive-through place, nothing special, and the employee inside keeps calling out an order. "For Pauline!" Again and again. And nobody goes up to get it. We're sitting there in the car, staring at each other like someone just turned the world into a joke we didn't understand. After that, we drifted. The three of us, slowly, naturally, like friendships do sometimes. But I've always wondered if we drifted because none of us could figure out how to talk about it without sounding insane. But I knew them. They weren't theater kids. They weren't prank people. And some things, like Drew running after that coyote, like the scratches on the door, like the way Ethan's eyes looked when he said, "I'm going swimming," without blinking, those things don't feel like acting when you're standing in front of them. So I don't know what it was. I just know that sometimes, when I hear waves at night, I think of that cardboard board and that single, fast slide to yes. And I get this cold feeling in my stomach, like the beach is still waiting for us to come back and finish the conversation. Okay, so I don't really tell this story outside of a tiny circle of friends, mostly because it sounds like the kind of thing you'd swear you'd made up after the fact. But I swear to you, this happened. Back in the early 2010s, I was in college in Chicago. I lived on campus all 4 years, in this tall old dorm that had been standing forever, built sometime around the 1920s. Before the school bought it, it wasn't even a dorm. It used to be this busy downtown building with offices and little storefronts, so you could just feel the layers of time in it, you know? Like thousands of people had passed through those halls long before we ever showed up with ramen and laundry bags. Anyway, it's my junior year, late 2012, and I'm living in a suite with 4 other guys. We had this shared common room that we basically treated like our living room. Couch, TV, a couple mismatched chairs, the usual. And the weird part of the layout was the window. It was huge, and it looked straight down the hall into the common room of the suite across from us. And the suite across from us was a group of girls we knew. Same year, same classes, friendly but not best friends. Their common room had the same big glass window. So when both sets of blinds were open, it was like accidental reality TV. They could see us, we could see them. Most of the time, we just ignore it, or do a little wave if someone happened to look over. So one night, it's me and two of my suite mates, Evan and Noah, camped out on the couch. We'd ordered a pizza and we were doing this dumb, perfect college thing. A marathon of kung fu movies, one after another, getting way too invested in every dramatic slow-motion punch. And I need you to understand something about Evan and Noah, because it matters. Both of them are the most level-headed, skeptical, rational people I've ever met. The type who would rather argue statistics than entertain a ghost story. No superstition, no, maybe it was a spirit, none of that. If anything weird happens, they immediately start hunting for the sensible explanation. Also, we were completely sober. No drinks, no anything, just pizza grease and martial arts sound effects. It's late, like right around midnight, and at some point I catch movement through that window across the hall. Not in the movie, not a reflection, real movement in the girls' common room. All three of us look over at the same time because it's obvious. Their lights are on, which makes it crystal clear, and we see a man walking right through the middle of their common room. At first glance, it's not like, oh my god, intruder. He looks like Staff. Late middle-aged, thinning hair, kind of stocky. He's wearing dark work coveralls and something like a utility belt, like keys or tools hanging off it. The thing is, Staff wasn't supposed to be in the building that late. Maintenance and custodial people clocked out early, definitely before 9 p.m. And on top of that, the campus had just sent emails warning about people from outside slipping into dorms when doors didn't latch, wandering halls, trying handles. So the second we see this guy, the vibe in the room changes. I remember blurting out something like, "Why is a custodian in their suite right now?" Noah squints and goes, "Maybe they had a leak, like an emergency call?" And I'm like, sure, maybe. But it doesn't sit right, because we don't see any of the girls. No one's talking to him. No one's following him. He's just moving through the room like he has a destination. And I'm thinking, if this is some random guy who got in, or someone who shouldn't be there, those girls are our friends. We can't just shrug and go back to the movie. So we stand up immediately and head into the hallway. We step into the hall and look down toward the elevator bank. And there he is. Same guy, same coveralls, walking calmly toward the elevators like he's finishing a shift. We start moving faster. We're not sprinting, but we're definitely trying to catch up before he disappears into an elevator. We're maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 meters behind him, close enough that I can see the shape of his shoulders and the way his arms swing, close enough that this doesn't feel like a trick of lighting. And I call out, loud enough to echo a little in the hallway. "Hey, sir." Nothing. So I try again, louder. "Hey, excuse me." Still nothing. No head turn, no pause, no flinch. Like we're air. And that right there is when my stomach drops, because it's one thing if he's Staff and just doesn't feel like dealing with students, but you still react when someone calls out in an empty hall. You at least acknowledge sound. He keeps walking. He reaches the elevator bank, and from our angle, it looks like he steps into one of the elevator openings. We rush the last stretch, and I'm already rehearsing what I'm going to say, like, "Sorry to bother you, but are you supposed to be here?" That kind of thing. But when we get to the exact spot, right where we saw him enter, we realize something that makes all three of us stop dead. He stepped into one of the elevators that doesn't work, one of the sealed ones, the gated, closed, unusable elevator shafts. And I don't mean the door was closing and we missed which one. I don't mean he slipped into a working elevator and we got confused. We watched him walk straight into the dead one, straight into where there shouldn't have been an opening at all. Evan immediately starts trying to logic it out. Maybe it's the angle, he says. Maybe he went into the one next to it and we thought, But that doesn't hold up, because if he'd gone into a working elevator, the doors would have been open long enough for us to see them. Those doors took forever to close, and we reached the elevator bank in like 2 or 3 seconds after he entered. There wasn't even time for a full close. Plus, there was no ding, no elevator light, no movement. Just the moment where he should have still been there, and instead he wasn't. The hallway is silent. It's just the 3 of us standing there, staring at a sealed elevator like it's going to explain itself. I remember Noah saying, really quietly, "That's not possible." And the worst part? None of us could even pretend he looked ghostly. He wasn't translucent. He wasn't shimmering. He looked like a completely normal, physical person. Solid. Real. Like you could have bumped into him. Except, he walked into a place a human being cannot walk into. The next day, I see one of the girls from that suite, her name was Tessa, in the lobby, and I'm still unsettled enough that I just go for it. I'm like, "Hey, weird question. Did you guys call maintenance last night? Like late? Around midnight? Plumbing problem? Locked out? Anything?" And the second I say it, her face changes. Not confused, more like wary. Like her brain wants to reject the question, but her body reacts anyway. "No," she says slowly. "We were all asleep. We had early classes." And she can see on my face that I'm not asking casually, so she goes, "Why?" So I tell her. I tell her about the guy crossing their common room and the hallway and the elevator. I keep it as grounded as I can, because even while I'm saying it, I can hear how insane it sounds. Tessa looks freaked out, like properly freaked out. But she tries to be practical too. She says maybe one of her suite mates called someone without telling the others. So she promises she'll ask. Later that day, she gets back to me. "So that's it. That's the whole story. No dramatic ending. No, and then the lights went out. Nothing like that. Just 3 sober, rational college kids watching a man walk into a sealed elevator shaft like it was the most normal thing in the world." And honestly, that's what still gets me. Not the idea of a ghost or a haunting or whatever people want to label it. It's that I saw a person where a person should not have been, and then he was gone. I've never had anything like that happen before or since. But that night still sits in the back of my brain like an unanswered question that refuses to fade. Okay, so first, a little context, because the where matters here. I live just outside Cincinnati, but not the Ohio side. I'm down in northern Kentucky, close enough that if you fly into the Cincinnati airport, you'd actually be landing nearer to my house than most of the city itself. It's one of those regions that's kind of stitched together from a lot of different worlds, different income levels, different neighborhoods, a lot of old history. Civil War history, river history, and the kind of native history you feel more than you can point to on a map. Stories tied to tribes like the Shawnee and Cherokee, mostly passing through or using the land for hunting rather than building big settlements right where I am. And yeah, around here, paranormal stories are basically part of the local seasoning. People talk about haunted spots like it's just normal small talk. I've got my own experiences too. But the thing I'm about to tell you, this one gets under my skin because I didn't see it myself. And none of the adults I've talked to have seen the main thing either. The only witnesses are teenagers. And look, I get it. If you're the kind of person who hears a bunch of teens said they saw something, and your brain immediately goes, "Sure, okay," I'm not even mad at you. I've done the same thing. But here's what changed it for me. Once you know a kid well enough, you start noticing their tells. Teenagers can be slick. but most of them don't have the patience to build a consistent lie over time, especially not when friendships fracture and they stop coordinating with each other. If anything, kids accidentally reveal the truth when they don't mean to, because they're still learning how to mask things. So, here we go. My son switched schools and met a group of kids who lived in a nearby trailer community. And before you picture some run-down, busted-up place, no. This one looks, honestly, kind of nice. Clean lots, decent upkeep. It had a basketball court, a playground, long looping streets where kids could ride bikes and mess around without constant traffic, and these open grassy areas where they'd set up little games like it was their own neighborhood park system. My son was thrilled. He wanted to be there all the time. Before long, I became the regular chauffeur. That was my role. Drop him off, pick him up, sometimes take a few of the kids with us on day trips. Movies, hiking, mini golf, whatever. My whole thing as a parent is balance. I want my kid to have experiences, and I want him around friends in more than one environment. And it was during those car rides, windows down, kids talking over each other, that I started hearing it. At first it sounded like typical spooky kid talk, like, "Oh dude, you know what's in the woods," that kind of thing. But eventually I got upgraded to, "All right, mister, is cool," and I started getting the full version of the stories instead of the edited, half-mumbled ones. Now, in this trailer community, there's this oddly placed strip of woods. Not a forest, not some big nature preserve, just this patch. Maybe about an acre wedged between two homes near a bend in the road, and then it narrows into this thin, stretched-out line of trees running behind the trailers for a good quarter-mile. It's also the side closest to the interstate, so I always assumed it was left there as a sound buffer, like nature's little noise wall. One of my son's closest friends, let's call him Mason, lived in one of the trailers right beside that wooded patch. And that matters later. And that's where the stories start getting weirdly consistent. They told me about seeing tall, dark shapes standing at a distance, like a person, but wrong. Not just a dude in a hoodie, more like a silhouette without detail. No face, no clear outline of clothes, just a vertical, humanish absence. And they'd blink and it would be gone. They told me about noises too, growling sometimes, wailing other times. And then the worst one, mimicry, a voice calling from deeper in the trees. Sometimes it sounded like one of their friends, sometimes like somebody's mom, sometimes like a little girl they didn't recognize. One kid swore he heard a baby crying out there, like right past the tree line, like it needed help. But the voice always had the same purpose, drawing them in. And then there were the marks. This is the part where I got a little colder about it, because a couple of them, more than one, showed me scratches and red welts after they'd gone near that patch. And what creeped me out was the pattern they themselves noticed. It tended to happen to the kid who was the weak link that day. Like, the smallest one, the one who was already jumpy, the one who'd been having a rough time at home, or the kid who went in there angry, grieving, stressed out. Like it wasn't random. Like something was picking the easiest target. Naturally, the kids had a name for it. They called it a skinwalker, which, yeah, I'm aware that's not really culturally accurate for Kentucky woods. I think it was just the monster of the moment, the label they had available. But even if the name was wrong, the fear didn't sound pretend. At first, it was all coming from one big friend group, and I told myself, okay, sure, they're hyping each other up. They've created a shared urban legend. Kids do that. But then the group blew up. Teen drama, friends splitting into enemy camps, backstabbing, the whole exhausting thing. And my son, being who he is, still tried to stay friendly with people on both sides. So I'd hear stories from kids who were no longer speaking to each other. And that's what got me, because they weren't comparing notes anymore, but they were still describing the same things. Same patch of trees, same distant figure, same voice calling you in, same tension. Then Mason told me something that made my stomach drop. He said he'd seen that same tall, dark, featureless figure inside his house, in the corner of his bedroom. Not outside, not at a distance, in his room, like it had crossed whatever line existed between the woods and everything else. And that was the moment my brain started making connections I didn't want to make. Because once I started paying attention, not to the paranormal stories, but to the adults and the general atmosphere, I noticed something else. It's like that whole place carried a kind of rot. People would move in and suddenly their lives would start unraveling. Cars that were fine would suddenly need expensive repairs. Couples who'd been together for years would split up in brutal, messy ways not long after relocating there. Kids who had never been violent would get mean, like truly aggressive, hair-trigger cruel. Injuries from accidents became common. Constant fighting, constant chaos. And then it escalated. This wasn't gossip, this was real. There was a situation where a teenager stabbed a grown man over something stupid and small. Like, the kind of petty conflict that should have ended with shouting, not blood. And that's the dividing line for me. So that's where I'm stuck. Because I can't prove anything supernatural happened. I didn't watch a faceless thing step between the trees. I didn't hear the voice myself. But I've heard these kids talk, separately, over time, with the kind of fear that doesn't feel performative. And I've watched the pattern of harm and negativity around that little wooded strip. And I keep coming back to the same thought, even though I hate it. What if there's something in that patch of trees? Something that doesn't roam beyond the community lines, but still influences everything inside them. Not like a ghost story where it slams doors and throws plates. More like a pressure, a stain, a slow leak of anger, misfortune, and hostility that just keeps seeping into whoever lives too close to it. I don't know what to call it. I don't even know what I believe. I just know it doesn't feel like a harmless legend anymore. And every time my son mentions that place, I find myself listening harder than I should, watching the kids' faces, watching their hands, trying to figure out who's genuinely scared and who's trying to pretend they aren't. So this happened about 11 years ago, when I was around 7 or 8. Back then, my family, me, my little brother, and my parents, lived in this old 3-story apartment building. Our place was kind of weird in a way I loved at the time. It had this loft-style upper level inside the apartment, like a half-second floor. My parents used that loft as their bedroom, and my dad sometimes kept paperwork up there on a little desk. Then, below the apartment itself, there was a basement level with storage and a small office where he usually worked because it was quieter. One afternoon, I was upstairs alone in the main apartment, sitting way too close to the TV, playing on my console. Pretty sure it was FIFA, because I remember the exact sound of the ball getting kicked. My mom was out at work, and my dad was down in the basement office with my little brother, doing his usual thing. At some point, I paused the game and wandered into the kitchen to make myself a couple of sandwiches. I'm spreading stuff on bread, half paying attention, when I hear it. My game. Not the menu music, not the crowd noise, the actual thwack of the ball being kicked, like someone had unpaused it and was playing. And the thing is, I was in one of those modes where it's basically just you and the goalkeeper. So every kick is really distinct, you know? I froze for a second, staring at the counter like my brain couldn't decide if it was about to laugh or panic. Then I walked back into the living room and no one was there. No one on the couch, no one standing behind me, nothing. But the game was unpaused. I remember my stomach doing that little drop, like when you miss a step on stairs. And almost immediately after that, I heard something from upstairs, up in the loft. It sounded like papers being pushed around, like someone was rummaging through a stack in a hurry. That loft wasn't huge, so any noise up there felt close, like it was happening right above your head. So I climbed up to check. I was trying to be brave, doing that thing kids do where you act tough but your eyes are too wide. And again, nobody. But my dad's little desk up there, his papers, were totally messed up. Not like one page slid off, like a whole stack had been shuffled and scattered, like someone had flipped through them and left in a rush. At that point, I was properly scared. Not spooky story scared, real kid scared. The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. I backed away, came downstairs, and told myself maybe it was just, I don't know, vibration, air, something normal. And then I heard it again, this time from my bedroom area. One of those plastic toy bins I kept all my stuff in. It sounded like someone digging through it, moving toys around, the soft clacking sound of plastic and pieces shifting. I went over there, already feeling like I didn't want to look, and when I pulled the lid back, nothing. No one. Nothing moving. Just the toys sitting there like they'd been innocent the whole time. That was it. I ran. I bolted down to the basement office like my life depended on it, blurted everything out to my dad and my brother at the speed of a fire alarm. My dad barely looked up at first. He was working, and to him it probably sounded like I was making up a dramatic story because I was bored. My brother, of course, hit me with the classic, "You're hearing things." Here's one detail that matters. From our front door, if you stood a certain way, you could see straight into the kitchen counter area. So we walked up to the apartment together, and before we even stepped fully inside, we heard this sharp, metallic sound, like two knives being scraped together. Slow, deliberate. Not a clatter, not an accidental bump, a drawn-out grind, like someone was pressing them together and moving them back and forth. We both stopped dead. We leaned in and peeked through the doorway, and I could see the kitchen counter clearly. No one was there. No hands, no shadow, no movement. But the sound was still coming from right there, like the knives were doing it all by themselves. I looked at my brother, and his face, he heard it too. I could tell instantly, because his expression changed from, "This is dumb," to, "Okay, what is that?" We didn't even discuss it. We just quietly, quickly shut the door like we were sealing something in, and then we ran back down to the basement crying, both of us, no shame, full panic. We stayed down there until my dad finished his work for the day. Hours. We didn't go back up even once. Later, when my dad finally came upstairs with us, we walked him through everything like we were reenacting a crime scene. Room by room, pointing, explaining. This is where the game unpaused. This is where the papers were. This is the toy bin. He tried to be calm. He did that dad thing where he explains everything with logic, because that's what you do when your kids look like they've seen a ghost. He told us sounds can travel weirdly in old buildings. Pipes can shift. Air pressure can move things. Maybe the controller got bumped. Maybe a draft flipped papers. And I wanted to believe him so badly. The weird part is, after that day, nothing like it ever happened again. Not once. No sounds, no rummaging, no unpausing, nothing. We moved out a couple years later, and I've told the story a bunch of times since then. Most friends laugh and say I'm exaggerating or making it up, which, fine. whatever. I get how it sounds. But about a year ago, I brought it up again with my dad, and we actually talked about it seriously. And he told me something I didn't expect. He said he remembered us being absolutely terrified, like genuinely shaken. And he admitted that he didn't want to show fear in front of us, because he felt like if he acted scared, we'd completely fall apart. So he stayed calm on purpose and tried to give us explanations, even if he wasn't fully sure himself. And then he said something that stuck with me. He said the reason a tiny part of him believes it is because every single time I've told it, over the years, the details never changed. Same sequence, same sounds, same places, like it was burned into my memory. And honestly, it is. To this day, I still don't know what caused any of it. I don't claim it was something supernatural. I don't even know what I think it was. I just know what I heard. And I know I wasn't the only one who heard it. Okay. I want to start by saying this. I've never been the ghost story person. Like, I'm usually the one who nods politely and thinks there's probably a logical explanation for that. I've always leaned toward the sciencey, grounded side of things. Not in a cold way, more like, I want to believe, but I need something to happen to me directly. Otherwise, it's just a story. So here's what happened. On my dad's side, there's this old family house. The kind of place that holds a lot of history in the walls, you know? Years ago, my grandmother, everyone called her Noni, not Nana, got really sick. Hospice came in, and they set up a bed for her on the first floor, right there near the front living room. She passed peacefully in that house. And after that? Nothing spooky. No footsteps, no lights flickering, no eerie dreams. If anything, the house just felt quiet. Sad sometimes, but normal. Fast forward. My dad inherited the place and moved back after living far away for a long time. He brought one cat with him, an orange one named Miso, and later adopted a second, this fluffy gray sweetheart named Juniper. Over time, I started rebuilding my relationship with him. It wasn't easy. We had history, complicated stuff, but we were trying. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was something to mend. Then this summer, everything changed fast. His health took a sharp turn. Suddenly, he couldn't move around safely, and he was a fall risk, so we set up a bed downstairs for him. Same general area where Noni's hospice bed had been years ago. It wasn't planned as some symbolic thing. It was just the safest spot. And then, just a few days ago, he was gone. He didn't pass in the house. He passed in the hospital. The timeline still feels unreal. He was home the day before, and then within one day we were in the ER, and by early the next morning he was gone. Just like that. Like the world quietly slipped its hands out from under me. Since then, I've been going over to the house every day, sorted paperwork, trying to be responsible, feeding the cats, making sure they're okay. The first time I walked in after it happened, it was brutal. I still do this thing where I say, "Hey, Dad," when I enter. I know I won't hear anything back. I'm not doing it because I expect a response. It's just me being open. Me letting myself talk into the silence because I don't know what else to do. The first evening I went over, nothing happened. I cried everywhere, like ugly crying. At the foot of his bed, in the hallway, in rooms I didn't even realize held so much weight. Before I left, I lay down on his bed for a while, and both cats climbed up and tucked in close. That part was actually comforting, like the only thing in the house that made any sense. Then the next night, this is the night I can't stop replaying. It was around 8 p.m. I went over again, did what I needed to do. More papers, more little tasks, that weird numb autopilot you get when you're grieving. And when I finished, I did the same thing I did the night before. I lay down on his bed. Miso hopped up. Juniper followed. They settled in like they'd been waiting for it. I was texting my mom, just trying to keep myself anchored to something normal. And then, it happened. Out of nowhere, this full-body chill slammed into me, but I did. And within seconds, like immediate, both cats reacted. Both heads snapped up at the same time, like a synchronized movement. Their ears went forward, eyes wide, locked on something that wasn't me. It was so fast and so sharp it startled me, and I'm already sitting there with my skin crawling. That was the part that hit me hardest. Because chills, okay, fine. Bodies do weird things. Grief does weird things. But two animals reacting instantly, together, like something just entered the room. That's not as easy to brush off. So we're all lying there, me frozen, the cat staring, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm feeling. I wasn't screaming or panicking. I didn't feel like I was in danger. It was more like shock. Like my brain was scrambling to find a label for something it didn't have a file for. And I started talking. Softly at first. Just talking into the air like a fool, except it didn't feel foolish in the moment. I said something like, "Dad, I love you. I miss you so much." And then my mind jumped and I thought, what if it's Noni? Because she passed here. And for a second I didn't know who I was even addressing, so I just said, "Okay, whoever this is, I feel you." The chill didn't immediately go away. It hung on, and the air in the room felt occupied. That's the only word I can think of. Like when someone's standing behind you and you don't hear them, but your body still knows. The cats stayed focused too, like they were tracking a presence more than a sound. After a bit, Juniper eventually got up and wandered toward the water bowl area, and Miso relaxed again like he decided the situation was acceptable. But my body was still buzzing with that chill, like it had left a fingerprint on me. I finally sat up, because at that point I felt unsettled. Not terrified, just shaken. Like I'd stepped over a line I didn't know existed. I started gathering a few things to take out to my truck, and I still had goosebumps outside. Outside, in the fresh air. It didn't make sense. Then I realized I'd forgotten something inside, and when I went back in, I'll be honest, I moved faster. My heart was thumping, and part of me was half expecting to see, I don't even know what. A shape, a shadow, anything. Nothing happened. No dramatic moment. I just said, "All right, good night," like I always do now, and I left. But I left different. Because I couldn't explain it. I couldn't rationalize it. And I'm the kind of person who usually can. When I got home, I told my wife immediately. And while I'm talking, our 4-month-old is staring at me with these huge, unblinking eyes, like she's completely captivated. Like she's listening too. It was actually kind of sweet. This tiny little person just locked into my voice while I'm trying not to sound insane. Tomorrow I'm going to tell my mom and my sister. I already texted them, like, "Something happened. I can't explain it. I need to tell you in person." Because I don't even know how to say it without sounding like I'm trying to convince myself. But I think, honestly, I'm not a skeptic anymore. I don't know if it was my dad. I don't know if it was Noni. I don't even know if I have the right to label it at all. I just know the room changed. My body knew. The cats knew. And for a moment, in the middle of all this grief, it felt like the house held more than just silence. So this really happened to me when I was about 16, maybe 17, in the woods of Leelanau County, Michigan. My family and I were up north on vacation, staying in that dreamy, everything smells like pine and lake water part of the world. One afternoon, we went to visit a family friend. Her name was Marianne, who lived way out in the middle of this dense forest, like the kind where the trees feel taller because the light can barely get through. What I remember first is the road. When we turned onto it, the pavement just ended. It became this crunchy gravel road that looked like it had been carved into the woods a long time ago and never updated. And I remember staring down it as we drove, watching it slope downhill, then curve left and disappear into the trees, like it was leading somewhere it didn't want to explain. A few hours go by. Adults are talking, everyone's relaxed, and I'm bored in that very teenage way where curiosity starts feeling like an itch under your skin. So I'm like, I'm just going to take a quick walk and see where that road goes. And I need you to understand, I grew up outside Chicago. I wasn't a woods kid. And up there, people casually mention things like black bears the way they talk about squirrels. I remember feeling nervous the whole time, like I was pretending I was brave, but my body didn't believe me. Still, I went. When I reached the top of the hill, it was actually kind of beautiful. Birds were chirping, frogs were going off somewhere, like the whole forest had its own soundtrack. It didn't feel threatening exactly, just alive. Too alive. I started walking down the hill, and to calm myself down, I started whistling that little 4-note tune from the Hunger Games. You know the one. It's simple, kind of haunting, but familiar. It made me feel like I had company, even if it was just my own noise. I got about halfway down the hill when everything changed. The birds stopped. The frogs stopped. Not gradually, not one by one. It was like someone hit a mute button. The whole forest just folded into silence so hard it felt physical. And immediately, my stomach dropped because I'd heard before, somewhere, sometime, that when the woods go quiet like that, it can mean there's a predator nearby. And I remember thinking, okay, this is the part where I turn around. But I didn't. I kept going because I was stubborn and curious and 16, and I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't scared of a road. I kept whistling as I walked, like if I stayed casual, the forest would stay casual too. Then, clear as day, I heard it. The whistle. Answering me. Perfectly. Same 4 notes. Same spacing. Same pitch. Like a mirror. And what messed me up wasn't just that it repeated the tune. It was how human it sounded. Not like a bird mimicking. Not like something distant and natural. It sounded like someone was right there in the trees, listening, waiting for me to do it again. Like it understood the game and was playing along. I stopped dead, just froze and stared at this patch of woods off the side of the road where the sound seemed to come from. And in that moment, I had this horrible, cold awareness that I was not alone, and whatever was there didn't want to be seen. I didn't call out. I didn't whistle again. I didn't even breathe normally. The second Marianne's house came back into view, I stopped pretending. I sprinted. Full panic sprint. Gravel slipping under my shoes, lungs burning, just running like something might follow me if I didn't. I got inside, and I swear I didn't leave anyone's eyesight for the rest of the night. I hovered around my family like a little kid, even though I was practically grown, because I couldn't shake that feeling that something had been watching me from the woods, and it knew I was there. To this day, I still don't know what it was. Could it have been a person messing with me? Maybe. Could it have been some animal mimicking? Possibly. But the way the forest went silent, the way that whistle came back so exact and so intentional, it still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. And honestly, the scariest part is that either answer is terrifying. Because if it was paranormal, that's obvious nightmare fuel. But if it was a real person out there, just standing in the trees, watching a teenager walk alone down a forest road and deciding to whistle back, that might be worse. So, I was 19 when I started dating this guy. Let's call him Eli. He lived at his mom's place, but he had this kind of almost apartment set up in the basement. Not fully separate, but separate enough that it felt like our own little world down there. Back then, I was apprenticing at a tattoo shop, which is just a fancy way of saying I was working my butt off and still somehow always broke. So once I started staying over, it turned into this routine where I'd crash at Eli's place. And by crash, I mean basically move in without officially being invited to. It was a real bed too, which felt luxurious compared to the random couches I'd been bouncing between. The only problem was, his mom, Mary Ann, was not exactly thrilled about me being there all the time. She wasn't mean, exactly, but she had that vibe where you can feel someone disapproving through walls. So I got really good at being invisible. Quiet footsteps, doors clicked shut gently, no leaving cups around, the whole thing. And honestly, I could have pulled off the ghost roommate act perfectly, if the house wasn't designed in the most inconvenient way imaginable. Because there was only one bathroom in the entire house. Eli's space was on the bottom floor, but the bathroom was all the way up on the second floor, right in the little hallway between Mary Ann's room and the room of Eli's younger sister, Nora. And we kept weird hours. I'd get home late from the shop, Eli would stay up with me, we'd watch something stupid, snack, talk, and suddenly it would be 2 or 3 in the morning like it happened in a blink. So this one night, we're finally about to go to sleep and I realize, oh no, I have to pee. And I'm thinking, it's fine, everyone's asleep. I can ninja my way up there and back down and nobody will ever know I exist. I start up the basement stairs, those old wooden stairs that complain about every single step you take. Like, the house wasn't creaky, it was dramatic. Every step sounded like a whispered accusation. I make it through the dark kitchen, past the living room, and up the next staircase toward the bathroom. I'm half asleep, eyes down, just watching my feet so I don't trip. And then, I feel it. This sudden cold. Not like, oh, the AC kicked on. Not like a draft. Like I walked into a refrigerated aisle at the grocery store. Like the air changed around me. I stop mid-step, and I actually remember thinking, what is that? Because it was so sharp and immediate it didn't make sense. I lift my head, squinting into the dark, and a couple steps higher, right at the top of the staircase, I see someone. A little girl, sitting cross-legged in the corner, tucked back like she'd been placed there on purpose. Long black hair, hanging forward so I couldn't see her face. And my first thought, my only normal thought was, oh, that's Nora. Because Nora had hair just like that, same length, same dark color. And I'm immediately like, oh my God, did I wake her up? Is she sick? Is she sleepwalking? And also, please don't let Mary Ann wake up. So I whisper, really softly, Nora? Nothing. She doesn't move, doesn't look up, just sits there. And I'm trying to be calm, because the rational explanation is, kid got up in the night. So I climb the last few steps and crouch down in front of her, still whispering her name like I'm trying not to spook a cat. And she still doesn't react. That's when my stomach starts doing that slow drop thing. Because even if a kid is half asleep, they usually do something. They shift, they mumble, they blink, anything. So I glance over my shoulder toward Marianne's room. Her door is cracked open, and I can see her in bed, asleep, completely out. Then, without even wanting to, I look down the hall at Nora's room. The door is open just enough that I can see the bed. And there she is, Nora. And I swear, in that moment my brain just stopped working. Because I'm crouched in front of a little girl who looks like Nora. And Nora is also very obviously asleep in her bed. So I turn back, and the girl in the corner is still there, right where she was. Hair still hiding her face, not moving, not breathing in a way I can see, just present. And it's so quiet that the silence feels loud. I didn't scream. I didn't say anything. I didn't even think properly. I just popped up so fast it felt like my whole body got yanked by a string. And I turned and practically flew down the stairs. I'm going down those steps like I'm late for the last train out of town. I get maybe halfway down and suddenly, the cold is gone. It doesn't fade. It doesn't gradually warm up. It's like someone took a heavy coat off my shoulders in one pull. I stop and look back up the staircase. Dark. Empty. No girl. No shape. No movement. Nothing. And I remember standing there thinking, absolutely not. I'm not going back up there. So I go straight to Eli, shake him awake, and I'm whisper yelling like, I need you to come with me, right now. I saw something upstairs. He's groggy, confused, trying to blink himself into reality. And I'm just standing there with my heart doing gymnastics. And here's the part that's almost funny now, except it wasn't funny then. I didn't use the bathroom. Nope. I put on my shoes and walked to a 24-hour gas station a few blocks away to use their bathroom instead. Alone. In the middle of the night. Like that was somehow the safer option. In daylight, I can admit that was a ridiculous choice. But in that moment, I was like, I will take my chances with strangers and parking lots. I am not going back up those stairs. The next morning, I finally tell Eli the whole story. I'm trying to laugh it off, like, okay, this is going to sound crazy, but... And I get to the part where I'm walking upstairs and I feel that sudden cold. And Eli's face changes, like, instantly. He goes completely serious, looks me dead in the eye, and goes, wait, you felt cold on the stairs? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, really quietly, and then you saw a little girl sitting at the top? And I just stared at him, because that wasn't a guess. That wasn't me leading him. He said it like he already knew the next line. And I didn't even ask what he meant. I didn't want details. I didn't want a backstory. I didn't want confirmation. I just said something like, cool, great, love that, in the most unconvincing voice on earth. And after that, I made sure I used the bathroom before I ever came over. Every single time. Because some lessons don't need to be taught twice. So, I'm not really someone who dreams. Or if I do, they slip away the second I wake up, like mist. And when I do remember something, it usually feels less like a dream and more like I accidentally went somewhere, like an unplanned out-of-body thing. I never try to do it. It just happens. But this time, this dream was different. It was so real it honestly scared me a little. It was vivid, sharp, and I felt completely awake, like my senses were switched on. All of a sudden, I'm back in my hometown. I'm standing in the street in front of my very first childhood house, the one with the uneven walkway and the big old tree that always dropped leaves everywhere. And I remember looking around like, oh, right, here I am, like I'd been dropped there on purpose. Then I start walking, just a short stretch, maybe a couple houses down, to this place where an older woman used to live. When I was a kid, I knew her well. She always felt safe, gentle, the kind of person who made you feel seen without even trying. When I get there, the house is buzzing with activity. People are hauling boxes and dragging furniture, and everything looks dusty, like the whole place has been shut up for years. It's hard to tell if they're renovating or clearing it out, but it's definitely being turned inside out. I stop one of the movers and I say, "Hey, I used to know the woman who lived here. Would it be all right if I stepped inside and looked around for a minute?" And without hesitation, they just go, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." So I walk up the front steps and go in. Inside, the living room is lit in that pale, washed-out way old houses sometimes are. And there are a couple people standing around talking like it's no big deal. And then I notice this worn-out armchair off to the side, kind of saggy, like it's held a lot of years. There's a cat sitting on it. Naturally, I'm like, "Oh, hi, sweetheart," and I walk over to pet it. But the second I step in front of the chair, something happens. I feel this pressure in my chest, except it's not just pressure. It's like a pulling, like someone grabbed the front of my shirt and yanked. I look down, and I can actually see my shirt pulled outward in front of me, like the fabric is being tugged. But I can tell that's just how my brain is translating the sensation. The real feeling is inside my body, deep and intense. And then, before I can react, I'm being pulled. Not gently, not like I'm choosing to move, like I'm being dragged by an invisible force that has decided I don't get a vote. I spin around and I'm pulled up the stairs, faster than I can think. I can't fight it. I can't grab the railing. All I can do is go with it, heart pounding, trying to understand what's happening. And then it stops. I'm in a bedroom, and on the bed, lying there like she's resting, is the older woman I used to know. Only, she's not exactly solid. She's kind of translucent, misty around the edges, like she's made of light and fog. But I know it's her. I recognize her immediately, the way you recognize someone you loved as a child even after decades. I walk to the side of the bed and kneel down, and I say, without even questioning why I'm saying it, "Hi, Maribel. How are you?" That's not her real name, but in that moment, that's what comes out of my mouth. Like my mind is reaching for the right person, but grabbing the wrong label. She looks at me and smiles, a real smile, warm, familiar, and she says, very calmly, "I think I'm ready to go." And something in me just softens, like I suddenly understand what this is, why I'm there. So I tell her, "If you feel ready, you can go. It's okay. We'll be all right." She smiles again, closes her eyes, and she fades. Not like a scary vanishing, more like a candle being blown out. Gentle. I stand up, still stunned, and then I feel that pulling sensation again, stronger, and it yanks me right out into the hallway. And then I'm pulled into another bedroom. This time she's standing there, not on the bed, just there, like she managed one more step. She looks at me and says something short, like an afterthought, like a final little message. I wish I could tell you what it was, but I can't remember it. It's like trying to hold on to words spoken underwater, but the feeling of it stayed. It felt like a PS, a last little add-on before she left for good. And then she fades again, and that's when I wake up. When I woke up, I was shaken in that quiet way, like you've just been part of something huge, but the room around you is ordinary and still, and I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the house, about how real it felt. And the weirdest part? Maribel wasn't her name. I knew that as soon as I was awake, but I also couldn't remember her real name at all, no matter how hard I tried. It was right there and totally unreachable. So I texted my uncle, because he would remember. I asked him, what was her name again? The older woman who lived a few houses down from our old place? He replied with her actual name, and then he added something that hit me right in the chest. She really loved you, you know. And I just sat there staring at my phone, because suddenly the whole thing felt connected, like whatever that was, dream, projection, spiritual moment. Maybe she really was ready. Maybe she just needed someone she trusted to tell her it was okay to let go. And maybe, somehow, our connection from when I was little, mixed with whatever strange doorway I sometimes slip through, is how I ended up there. Not to be scared, not to explore, just to help her leave. So, this happened a little over 8 years ago, and I've had my fair share of weird, paranormal moments. But this one still sits right at the front of my mind like it happened yesterday. At the time, my partner, Eli, had just left for a long stretch of military training, and I was stuck in this awkward in-between period where I couldn't move with him yet. So I stayed with a family friend for a couple months, tucked into their spare bedroom, trying to keep my head down and just get through that temporary little limbo. And honestly, because I knew it wasn't permanent, my life kind of took on this strange, whatever works energy. I just needed enough money to keep my bills paid, so when the job I'd once loved started turning into a daily stress fest, I quit. I ended up following my friend Marin into this industrial sewing place. Big machines, heavy canvas, the kind of space that smells like fabric dust and oil. It was actually fun. Super flexible too. You could show up and never know who'd be working at the other stations that day. Now, the day this story really begins, the place was unusually empty. It was just me and Marin at the big cutting table in the middle, laying out canvas and measuring pieces for the day. We got on this topic, those oddly specific things that scare you. Not the obvious horror movie stuff, more like the smaller, personal, immediate nope triggers. The kind of thing that makes your stomach drop and your brain go, yeah, I'm leaving, immediately. And at some point I told Naren one of mine. I said one of the creepiest sounds in the world, to me, is slow scratching. Not frantic scratching, like a branch tapping or a pet pawing at a door. I mean, slow, deliberate scratching. Like something is doing it on purpose. Like it's not trying to get in so much as it's making sure you know it's there, and that it has all the time in the world. And because I'm dramatic, I did a little demonstration. I dragged my fingernails down the rough surface of the cutting table. Slow, steady. Then, right at the end, I snapped my fingers down in a quick little swipe to finish it off. Like punctuation. Marin's whole face twisted up in this look like, please never do that again. So I knew it landed. We laughed it off, shook it away, and went on with our shift. That night, I was in the spare bedroom at my family friend's house, stretched out on the bed reading. My dog, Rook, was curled beside me. Rook was a big, solid dude, half lab, half bulldog, pitch black, with that heavy face that made him look like he should be guarding a gate somewhere. But he was an absolute marshmallow. He wasn't protective. He wasn't tough. He didn't bark. And when I say he didn't bark, I mean it. The only sounds I'd ever gotten from him were these little whiny, please noises when treats were involved, or a dramatic huff if he felt ignored. So when I heard him growl, really growl, my whole body went cold. It wasn't a warning grumble. It was deep and heavy, like it came from somewhere in his ribs. I felt the vibration of it through the mattress. I looked over and his hackles were up, fully raised, every hair along his back standing. I reached out, put my hand on him, and followed his stare. He was locked onto the bedroom door. And then it happened. A slow, intentional scratching started at the very top of the door. Not near the knob, not near the bottom like an animal would. From the top, like something tall, or something that didn't care about anatomy, was dragging nails downward at an almost leisurely pace. And it just kept going. It felt endless, like the sound had weight, like it was being done for me. And then it stopped, and finished with a sharp, quick swipe at the bottom, like a final little flourish. I swear my brain stalled out. I sat there frozen, my hand hovering on Rook's bristled fur, not even breathing right. He stayed rigid, staring at the door like if it opened, he was going to turn into a different animal entirely. I tried so hard to rationalize it. Pipes, old house, something settling, anything. But it was too on the nose, too perfectly timed, too specific. Marin didn't know where I lived. No one at work did. My family friend and their spouse were sweet, normal people who went to bed early and absolutely weren't the "let's terrify our guest with door scratching" type. And even if they were, how would they have known the exact thing I'd talked about at work that day? And there's the other detail. Rook wasn't faking anything. That dog was ready. Whatever he thought was on the other side of that door, he didn't like it. Not even a little. Eventually, the house stayed quiet. The sound didn't come back. And at some point, somehow, I slept. But it was the kind of sleep where you wake up feeling like you didn't rest. You just blacked out with one eye open. The next day, about half an hour into our shift, me and Marin were at the cutting table again, laying out canvas, and I finally said, "Okay, I have to tell you what happened last night." I started to say, "Do you remember our conversation yesterday about..." And before I could even finish, I saw Marin's hand lift toward my hoodie collar, which immediately threw me because we weren't touchy people at all. We were the type of friends who could work side by side for 10 hours and show affection exclusively through sarcasm. So I went still, watching him, and his face kind of tightened up like he was concentrating. And he goes, really quietly, "What are those?" I didn't know what he meant, so I pulled out my phone, flipped to the front camera, and looked. 3 red scratch marks ran down the side of my neck, straight from just under my ear down toward my collarbone. 3 lines. Thin, clean. Not something you get from absent-mindedly scratching in your sleep. And definitely not from Rook. His nails were thick, blunt, like little chalky stubs. If he'd done that, it would have looked completely different. I just stared at my own reflection for a second, feeling my stomach drop in slow motion. Because suddenly, hey my friends, welcome to the Paranormal M channel. Can't sleep again, huh? Don't worry, I'm right here to share real paranormal experiences from all over the world to help you drift off a little easier. Thank you so much to everyone who's been sending in their stories. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. And if you've had a paranormal experience of your own, send it to us so we can share it on the channel. Alright, let's get started. So, I'll start off by saying this isn't my story. It's my friend Leo's, but I've heard it so many times over the years that I can pretty much tell it by heart now. Every time we manage to see each other, which is rare since we live about a 12-hour drive apart these days, we end up on somebody's porch with a couple of drinks, and I make him tell it again. We're both in our late 30s now, but this happened when he was just a kid. So, picture little 8-year-old Leo. He's playing out front of this small house his family rented back then. There's this tiny patch of grass and a low wooden fence, nothing fancy. On one side of the house, there's this long, narrow, covered walkway that runs from the front to the backyard, like a tunnel made of shadow, he always calls it. It's late afternoon, the sun's kind of low, throwing those long, orange shadows. He's out there with a toy car or something, just doing kid stuff. And as he's playing, he notices movement out of the corner of his eye. He looks up and sees a man. The guy is coming from the back of the house, walking along that side path toward the front. At first, Leo just thinks it's maybe a neighbor cutting through, or one of his mom's friends. So he does what polite little kids do and says, "Hi." No answer. The man just keeps walking, slow, steady, like he's on a track, eyes fixed straight ahead. That's the first thing that unsettles Leo. Not just that he doesn't respond, but that he doesn't even react. No blink, no nod, nothing. Leo says to me, You know how sometimes someone gives you a weird vibe and you don't know why? It was like that, but turned up to 10. He notices the guy is off. The color is wrong. He looks like he's in some kind of red outfit, but not like a jacket or a shirt. More like one solid red layer, head to toe. Leo can't quite make sense of it yet. He just feels this rush of fear. Without really thinking, he bolts into the house. He tries to tell his mom. Now, his mom, back in those days, had people over a lot. That afternoon, the living room's full of cigarette smoke and the clink of bottles and loud laughter from the TV and her friends. She's halfway through a long day of drinking, and Leo is this little voice trying to cut through all that noise. "Mom, there's a weird man outside," he tells her. She kind of glances over him, says something like, "Stay in the yard, you're fine," and turns back to her friend's story. They're all in that lazy, half-buzzed mood, and nobody is really tuning in to what he's saying. Leo stands there for a minute, feeling brushed off. And then another feeling creeps in. Curiosity. He tells me, "I was scared, yeah, but I also really, really wanted to know what I'd just seen. I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining it." So he decides to go back out. He steps out the front door again, heart pounding, and walks over to the side of the house, right by that covered path. It's quieter now out there, just the distant sound of a TV from inside and a car passing a few streets over. He waits. He told me, "I don't know why I thought he'd come back the exact same way, but I just had this feeling." And sure enough, after a moment, he sees movement at the far end of the walkway. The man appears again, turning the corner from the backyard into that narrow side path, and starts walking toward him. Same slow, steady pace. Same fixed direction. Only this time, Leo is really looking. He realizes it's not a red suit at all. Leo says, "I know how crazy it sounds, man. I've spent my whole life trying to come up with a normal explanation. But there was no fabric, no seams, nothing. Just muscle. Like in those anatomy diagrams at school, except moving. Breathing. The torso is thick, strong. The arms and legs look like someone who lifts weights constantly, overdeveloped, almost too big for his frame. There's no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, just that red, raw surface. And the feet. This part always makes me shiver. He swears the feet weren't like normal human feet. They looked more like 3 thick, spread-out toes on each foot, with these wide gaps between them, planted flat on the ground. When he told me for the first time, he actually held up his hand and spread 3 fingers, like they looked like this, but on the ground. The face is the worst of it. Leo says the features were human enough, structure-wise, nose, mouth, cheeks, but there was no skin. Just red muscle stretched over everything. And the eyes looked wrong. Not just in a scary way, but in an empty way. Like they were focused on him, but there was no feeling behind them at all. He told me, when he looked at me, it felt like someone was staring through me, like I was a bug pinned to a board. This thing keeps coming closer. Step, step, step. No sound except the dull thud of its feet on the concrete. It doesn't speed up. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't tilt its head. It doesn't reach out. It just comes. Leo says by that point, he was absolutely sure this wasn't some prank, wasn't a costume. He didn't hear anyone else. No laughter, no whispers, no footsteps behind it. Just this skinless man in his side yard. And then there's this feeling that washes over him. So strong that even now, decades later, he gets quiet when he talks about it. He told me, "I knew he wanted to get to me. Not like, Oh, I was scared he might. I knew. The whole time he walked toward me, I could feel that the goal was to reach me. And it wasn't curiosity. It wasn't like he wanted to say hi. It felt like being hunted. I remember asking him, "What do you think he wanted with you?" And he just looked down at his glass and said, "Nothing good." I don't know what exactly, but it was not good. It felt like if he put his hands on me, that would be it. I don't think I'd be here talking to you. I asked, "What do you think would have happened if he actually reached you?" He didn't even hesitate. Honestly, I think he would have taken me. I don't know where, I don't know how, but I don't think I'd be alive now. The thing keeps coming. 10 feet away. 8. 5. Leo's frozen. He says it felt like his body, especially his legs, had just stopped belonging to him. The air felt too heavy, like he was trying to move underwater. The only thing he could really feel was that gaze, locked on him. Finally, when this skinless figure is within a couple of feet, something breaks. That survival switch flips back on. He spins around and bolts for the front door. He doesn't look back. He doesn't check if it's following him. He just runs. He bursts into the house, slams the door, and dives into the noise and the smoke and the safety of his mom's messy living room. He doesn't go back out there for the rest of the day. And after that, he never sees it again. No more men in red at the side of the house. No more skinless figures walking that path. Just nothing. Like it had come for that one moment, and when it couldn't reach him, it gave up and moved on. We've talked about all the rational explanations. Some guy in a costume, a trick of the light, a childhood nightmare that blurred into memory. He's considered all of that. He wants one of those answers to be true. But he'll always end with the same line. It doesn't feel like a dream when I remember it. It feels like a day in my life. And that's why, even now, it still gives me chills. I've heard Leo's story of the skinless man more times than I can count, and yet I know the next time we manage to meet up, I'll hand him a beer and say, "All right, tell me about the thing in the side yard again." And he'll sigh, and he'll laugh, and then he'll tell it, just like I told it to you. So, let me just start at the beginning. About a month ago, my younger cousin Leo came over and asked if I'd do a Ouija session with him. You know, candles, board, the whole cliché. I laughed at first and told him, "No way, I'm not stupid enough to mess with that." He looked offended and said, "Why not? You're always talking about souls and spirits and demons. If anyone should be curious, it's you." And I said to him, "That's exactly why I won't do it, because I do believe. I know there's something out there. And once you open that door, you don't get to decide who walks through." I tried to explain it clearly, like I'm telling you now. When you talk to spirits, you don't choose who answers. Some are confused, some are cruel, some are genuinely evil. And if you let one of those in, it will twist you, drain you, break you down piece by piece, your heart, your soul, and eventually, your sanity. And I told him, I've seen it happen with my own eyes. I had this friend, let's call him Amir. We used to hang out all the time. Smart guy, a bit eccentric, loved all that open your third eye stuff. One day he got obsessed with colloidal gold. You've probably heard people talk about the mild stuff, like 10 ppm, that's supposed to activate the pineal gland or whatever. Yeah, no. He went way beyond that. He started making his own mixture at home. He bragged it was something insane like 1800 ppm, way, way stronger than anything you'd buy. He drank it every day, huge glasses of it. He was basically poisoning himself, and it changed him. Within a few weeks, he wasn't the same person anymore. He started calling me at 3 in the morning, whispering. Not talking, whispering. He'd say, "They're on the roof. I can hear them climbing." Or, "There's something in my room. It's talking to me." I thought it was just paranoia, maybe a bad reaction to the gold or lack of sleep. But it got worse. One afternoon, I went to his place to check on him. His uncle, Stefan, opened the door. I'll never forget his face. Eyes red, like he hadn't slept, like he'd been crying for hours. He said, "He locked himself in his room. He won't talk to me. Maybe he'll talk to you." I walked down the hallway and knocked gently. "Amir? It's me." The door flew open so hard it hit the wall, and he grabbed my wrist and yanked me inside. He locked the door and pressed his back against it, breathing like he'd just sprinted for his life. His eyes, they were huge, wild, like an animal in a trap. He pointed at the ceiling with a shaking hand and said, "They're up there. They're waiting. If I go outside, they'll tear me apart." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Who's they, man?" He looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question in the world. "The ones I see, the ones I hear, the ones I smell. They hate being seen for what they really are. They're rotten, they're ugly, they stink like corpses. They're demons." The way he said, "demons," it was like he wasn't just scared, he was already broken. About 10 minutes later, he suddenly stiffened, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed into a seizure right there in front of me. We called an ambulance. His uncle was shaking, mumbling prayers. I told the paramedics I was his brother so I could stay with him. They loaded him in, hooked him up to everything. The nurse, Julia, sat on one side, I sat on the other, and the paramedic was facing us. The siren came on, and we took off toward the hospital. On the way, Amir grabbed my sleeve, pulled me closer, and whispered, "Brother, I can smell them. They're here." I opened my mouth to tell him it was just in his head. It was like something slammed down on the roof of the ambulance. Bang. We all froze. You could see it in everyone's faces. We each waited for someone else to say, "Oh, that's just a pothole," or "It's the stretcher," something normal. Then it came again, louder. Bang, bang, bang. The whole ambulance shook, rocking from side to side like we were being hit by waves. My heart just stopped. I thought, no, he's hallucinating. This is my imagination. This is nothing. Then I looked at the nurse. She had gone completely white. Her eyes were wide, staring up at the ceiling. Her hands were trembling. She whispered, "What the hell is that?" So it wasn't just us. The paramedic shouted toward the front, "Hey, slow down. You're losing control back here." The driver yelled back, "I am slowing down. Something's wrong with the van." And the banging didn't stop. It got angrier, heavier, like something big was crawling all over us, throwing itself against the metal. Then the smell hit. It rolled in like a wave, thick, wet, choking. Imagine the worst rotten meat you've ever smelled and multiply it by 10. It stuck to the back of my throat. My eyes watered. Under the noise, I started hearing these low, guttural growls. Not from my friend. Not from any human throat. It sounded like something trying to form words, but not quite managing. The driver suddenly shouted, voice cracking, "This is really fucked up." He begged the paramedic for a cigarette just so he'd have something normal to focus on. For a second, I almost told him to light it. Fire, smoke, anything human, anything ordinary to break that moment. And then, Just like that, silence. No more banging, no more growling. The smell faded like it had never been there. By the time we pulled up to the hospital entrance, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Later, when things calmed down and Amir was somewhat stable, he kept saying, "At least now I know I'm not crazy. You felt it too. She headed it too." And he was right. We did. We spent weeks trying to rebuild his mind. Medication, therapy, talking, grounding. Slowly, he stopped calling at 3 a.m. Slowly, he laughed again. Eventually, he could talk about that ambulance ride and half joke about it. But for me, it didn't end there. That night was like a door opening. Ever since then, I've been experiencing things I wish I could just write off as stress. When I try to sleep, I feel someone touch my shoulder or brush my foot under the blanket. I spin around. No one there. That same rotten smell shows up randomly. I'll be in the kitchen or sitting on the bus, and suddenly it's there, curling into my nose, just for a second, then gone. Sometimes I feel eyes on me in the dark. Not the normal, I'm a bit creeped out feeling. This deep, heavy awareness that something is watching, just outside the edge of what I can see. I hear whispering right next to my ear as I'm falling asleep. Not words I can understand, more like breath that tries to be language. I jerk awake, gasping, heart racing, lungs burning like I'd been underwater. Panic attacks, nights and nights of them. Sleep paralysis came next. I'll be lying on my side, totally awake in my mind, but my body won't move. The room is dim, the lights from the street coming through the blinds, and in the corner, always in the same corner, there she is. A tall woman. Too tall. Her head almost brushing the ceiling. Her hair hanging forward, hiding most of her face, but not her smile. She laughs. This low, cruel laugh that feels like it's inside my skull. She says things I can't repeat. Not because I'm scared, you can believe me or not, but because the words feel poisonous. Like if I say them out loud, something will hear me and answer. The worst dream I had was this one. I saw myself in a completely dark room. No walls, no floor, just black. But I knew I was chained to something, some kind of metal post. And then they started burning me. I felt it. I really felt it. The fire, the skin blistering, the smell of my own flesh turning into that same rotten stench from the ambulance. I screamed until my voice tore apart. I could hear them laughing, see hands pulling at me from the dark. When I woke up, my whole body hurt. My throat was raw. My sheets were twisted and soaked with sweat. Since that night, I can only sleep with all the lights on. Every lamp, every little LED. Doesn't matter. Even then, they're still there. I'll be lying on my side, staring at the wall, and I'll see movement in the corner of my eye. Shapes, sometimes a hand, sometimes a face. The moment I turn my head, they vanish with this sound, like a quick swoosh of air. I'm exhausted. For months now, I've barely managed 4 hours of sleep a night. My body is weak. My mind is frayed at the edges. And still, whatever I ran into that night, it hasn't let go. One more thing, and then I'll stop, okay? Since all of this started, it's like I see darker things in the world around me. Not just in my room, not just at night, outside, in the streets. I live in Germany, in a really rough part of Berlin. During the day, it's just loud and dirty and depressing. But at night, it feels different, heavy. When I walk my dog late at night, his name is Milo, this tiny dachshund poodle mix, barely 5 kilos. I feel it. The air gets thick. The streetlights look weaker than they should. It's like the whole neighborhood is holding its breath. Sometimes, I'm sure I see things move in places where nothing should move. A shadow stepping away from a wall, then melting back into it when I focus. Last week, I took Milo out around midnight. The streets were quiet, just distant traffic and a drunk guy arguing with himself a block away. Milo stopped to poop beside a parked car. The shadow of the car fell over most of his body, so only his head and a bit of his back were in the light. I wasn't really paying attention at first. I was just scrolling on my phone. Then I realized he wasn't moving. I looked up. He was standing completely still in this weird, stiff posture. His eyes were huge, staring straight ahead, not blinking. His little body was trembling, but he wasn't making a sound. I said, "Hey buddy, you done? Come here." Nothing. No ear twitch, no tail wiggle, just that frozen stare. I tugged gently on the leash. Normally that's all it takes. He trots right over. But this time, it was like the leash was tied to a concrete block. So I pulled harder. Still nothing. And then, I saw it. In the shadow under the car, where his back legs were, it wasn't just darkness. There were hands. Several of them. Long, black hands reaching out from the shadow, wrapped around his hind legs, his belly, pulling him down. Clawing at him, trying to drag him deeper into that patch of darkness. My brain kind of broke for a second. It was like my eyes were arguing with my mind. This can't be real. While every instinct in me screamed, "Move." I panicked. I grabbed the leash with both hands and pulled with everything I had, shouting his name over and over. For a moment, I felt resistance, like I was in a tug-of-war with something on the other end. And then, suddenly, he came free. So fast that his little body flew through the air and slammed into my legs. He yelped in pain, and I dropped to my knees, scooping him up, apologizing, heart racing. When I dared to look back under the car, there was nothing. Just darkness. Just a normal shadow. But for 3 days after that, Milo wouldn't stop shaking. He wouldn't eat properly. He wouldn't wander off, not even a meter. He knows what he saw. And so do I. So when people ask why I won't touch a Ouija board, or why I sleep with the lights on, or why my dog is glued to my ankles, I just smile a little and say, because once you open that door, you don't get to choose who walks through. And I mean every word. So, let me just start from the beginning. We've only been in our new build place here in the UK since January. It's me, my husband Dan, and our 21-year-old son, Leo, all rattling around this very normal, very unhaunted semi. Or so I thought. The first weird thing happened on a Friday night, or technically, early Saturday morning. It was 12:57 a.m., and I shot awake because music was booming through the house, proper vibrating the walls loud. It took me a second to realize what the song was. It was Stronger by Kanye West, just that heavy beat thumping through everything. My first thought was, oh, for God's sake, Leo's got his music on again. So I grabbed my phone and texted him from bed. "Leo, turn it down." He replied straight away, "It's not me. I'm just watching YouTube with my headphones." That's when I noticed how much bass there was. It didn't sound like it was coming from his room. So I opened our bedroom door, stepped out onto the landing, and just listened. The sound was coming from downstairs, from the living room, from our Sonos speaker. I stood there, half asleep in my dressing gown, absolutely confused. And then, after maybe 30 seconds, the music just cut off. Dead. Silence. I went back to bed, texting Leo a bit, both of us trying to make sense of it. When Dan woke up properly in the morning, I told him what happened and said, "I can't believe you didn't hear any of that. Our bedroom's right above the living room." We decided it must have been some random glitch. Annoying, but whatever. We kind of laughed it off. I really wish it had stayed that simple. The next night, just after midnight, 12:06 a.m., both of us woke up at the same time. This time it wasn't Kanye. It was Footloose, blasting out like someone was having an 80s dance party in our lounge. Dan sat bolt upright and just went, "What the hell?" and leapt out of bed. He ran downstairs to see what was going on. While he was down there, the music stopped again. So he came back up and was like, "There's no one there. Nothing's on." He was literally just stepping back into the bedroom when the music started again. Same speaker, different song. Now it was Cyndi Lauper, "Girls Just Wanna Have Fun," pouring out of our Sonos like we'd hit shuffle on some hen party playlist. Dan grabbed his phone and opened the Sonos app while we were both sitting on the bed. On the screen it said, "Recently played, family favorites." The music had gone quiet again at this point, so we were just staring at the app, trying to figure out who or what was controlling it. And then, right in front of us, family favorites just disappeared. The recently played section went completely blank and said, nothing. We just looked at each other. A second later, at the bottom of the app, a little bar popped up. Cyndi Lauper, song title, the volume slider, the play pause button, all the controls you see when someone is actively playing something. We hadn't touched anything. We were literally just watching. As we stared at the screen, it changed from paused to play all on its own, and the music started up again downstairs. Dan hit pause. It stopped. Then it flicked itself back to play. He paused it again. It turned itself back on. This went on for a few seconds. Play, pause, and then we watched, horrified, as the volume slider started creeping up. Not in little jumps, but smoothly, like someone was dragging it up. Dan pulled it straight back down. A second later, it started climbing again. Higher, higher, all the way to maximum. He kept fighting it, trying to drag the volume down, hitting pause, but it was like something else was fighting back. And then the song changed. That's when it stopped being funny. Suddenly, instead of Cyndi Lauper, this really eerie, old-fashioned voice came on. Tiny Tim, singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips. I don't know if you've ever heard it in the middle of the night, in a dark house, after your speaker has apparently developed a mind of its own, but it is horrible. The second that song started, something in me just snapped. I burst into tears. I wasn't even embarrassed about it. I just felt this cold, horrible dread in my chest. Dan went completely pale, and he is not a man who scares easily. He's 6'3", works with his hands, runs his own trade business, very practical, very there's always an explanation kind of person. And he just looked at me and said, "We're turning it off. Now." We both got up, went into Leo's room first, just to check. He was out cold, fast asleep, the proper deep breathing, tangled in his duvet kind of asleep. No phone in his hand, no smirk, nothing. There is just no way he was orchestrating any of this. It's not even his sense of humor. So we went downstairs together. The house felt wrong. I don't even know how to describe it better than that. Just heavy and still. The music was still playing that Tiny Tim song, quietly now, like it was taunting us. We walked into the living room, and there was the Sonos speaker, little green light glowing like everything was totally normal. Nothing else was on. TV off. No laptops, no other devices. Just that light. We both just stood there for a moment. For the first time in my life, I found myself silently saying the Lord's Prayer in my head. I'm not religious at all, but in that moment I was like, if anyone is listening, please make this stop. Dan unplugged the speaker at the wall. The music cut out instantly. No fade, just gone. The light went out. The app on his phone went blank. No recently played, no cue, nothing. It was like it had never been on. We went back over everything we could think of. The soundbar is only connected to the TV. Only Dan even has the Sonos app on his phone. We don't have any other smart speakers set up in the house. We've got 2 old Alexas in a box somewhere from the move, but they're not even plugged in. There's no Spotify or anything else directly linked to the singer. Our Wi-Fi is locked down with a strong password, no neighbors piggybacking or anything like that. And it wasn't our son. He had work early the next morning. He was exhausted, and honestly, it's just not in his nature to pull a stunt like that, especially in the middle of the night. So here we are. Logically, I know there must be some explanation, some glitch or hack or something that a tech person could walk in and point out. But in the moment, watching that volume bar drag itself to max, hearing that weird old song kick in by itself, feeling the whole house vibrating, it felt like something else. Like something was in our home with us, playing with us. I keep telling myself it's just a speaker, just software, just a bug. But if I'm being completely honest, when I think about that tiny green light in the dark and that voice singing "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" at 1 in the morning, yeah, it still makes my skin crawl. So, let me tell you about something that happened to me a while back. I still don't really know how to explain it. This was about 3 years ago. I'd just gotten home from a long night shift at the hospital. I'm a pediatric resident, so my shifts can get pretty brutal. That night had been one of those shifts where everything happens at once. Crying kids, worried parents, alarms, paperwork. By the time I got home, I was running on fumes. Anyway, I went straight to my room. My room has a bunk bed. My bed's on top, and my younger brother Marco uses the bottom bunk whenever he stays over. That night he was there, and so was his girlfriend Lena. They were curled up on the bottom bunk, watching some action movie on my laptop. I remember tossing my bag in the corner, kicking off my shoes, and climbing up to the top bunk. It was around 10:30 or 11 at night. I said something like, "You two don't stay up too late, okay?" And Marco laughed and said, Yeah, go to sleep, old man." I was so tired I didn't even make it halfway through their movie. I just knocked out. The next thing I remember is waking up in the dark. You know that weird feeling when you wake up and the world feels too quiet? That's how it was. No movie playing, no whispers, no one walking around. Just silence. My room was completely dark, except for that faint bluish light coming in from the street lamp outside. I reached for my phone under my pillow and checked the time. It was 4:47 a.m. At first I was like, wow, I actually slept. And then I thought, wait, did Marco and Lena stay the night? Because Lena's parents are really strict. They never let her stay past midnight. Ever. Curious, I leaned over the side of the top bunk and looked down. Marco was there on the bottom bunk, sleeping on his side facing the wall. I could see his messy hair and his arm hanging a little off the edge of the bed. And next to him, tucked in under the same blanket, was Lena. At least, I thought it was Lena. She was lying on her back, eyes wide open, staring straight up at me. At first it didn't bother me. I just assumed she couldn't sleep or she'd woken up when I moved. So I whispered, "Hey, Lena, you okay?" Nothing. She just kept staring. No blink, no little smile, no, "Hey," just still. I tried again, a little louder this time. "Lena, you good?" Silence. That's when this little knot formed in my stomach. Because Lena is usually really polite, kind of shy even. If she couldn't sleep, she'd at least whisper something back, or laugh, or ask why I was whispering like a weirdo from the top bunk. But she didn't move. Not even a twitch. Her eyes were just locked on mine. For a moment I thought, maybe she's annoyed I woke her up. Then my brain caught up with the rest of me. Wait, her parents. Her parents would never let her stay this late. and it was almost 5 in the morning. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they made an exception. Maybe she texted them and they said it was fine. I was exhausted, and honestly, at that hour, your brain will accept almost anything so you can go back to sleep. I decided I needed to pee before trying to sleep again, so I started climbing down the ladder. The whole way down, I could feel her eyes following me. Not turning her head a bit to watch me walk, kind of following. I mean, from the moment my feet hit the floor to the moment I walked past the bed and toward the door, she didn't move her head at all. Just her eyes, tracking me. Still no blinking. Still no expression. I didn't say anything else. I suddenly didn't feel like talking. I splashed some water on my face, tried to shake it off. Told myself I was just overtired and imagining things. Long shifts mess with your head. You start seeing shadows move, hearing your name when no one said anything. I tried to put it in that category. On my way back, I hesitated in the doorway for a second. The room was exactly the same. Marco, asleep. Lena, lying on her back, eyes open, still staring in my direction. At that point, you'd think I'd freak out, right? But I didn't. I was so drained that my brain basically went, you know what? Nope, we're not doing this. We're going back to bed. So I climbed up to the top bunk, carefully, trying not to think too hard about the fact that someone who shouldn't be there was watching me. I lay down, turned my back toward the wall, and pulled the blanket over my head like a kid. I told myself, sleep. You have rounds in a few hours. Just sleep. Somehow, I did. In the morning, sunlight was leaking in through the curtains, and the whole thing felt like a fuzzy, uncomfortable dream. Marco was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, on his phone. The bottom bunk was empty. So I asked him, "Hey, what time did Lena end up going home? Her parents didn't get mad." He frowned at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she stayed late, right? Like, really late. I saw her here at almost 5. He blinked a few times, then laughed like I was messing with him. "Dude, I took her home before 1. Her dad would murder me if she stayed later than that. You were already snoring when we left." I just stared at him. "No, I woke up at 4:45. I saw you sleeping and Lena lying next to you. She was awake. She was staring at me. I even talked to her." Marco stopped laughing. He pulled out his phone and showed me his chats with her. There was a message from around 12:40 a.m. "Just got home. Thanks for the ride." And his reply at 12:42. "Text me when your dad stops glaring at me." So, yeah, according to him and her, she'd been home for hours by the time I woke up. I remember feeling this cold wave wash over me. My room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had moved in a little. That bottom bunk, where I'd seen her, where that thing had been, was just an ordinary bed again. Marco kept saying, "You must have been dreaming." But I know what dreams feel like. I know what it's like to wake up confused and piece together weird fragments. This wasn't that. I was awake. I checked the time. I climbed down the ladder. I walked past the bed. I went to the bathroom. I came back. I remember the cool tile under my feet, the sound of the bathroom fan, the way the hallway light looked under my door when I came back in. And most of all, I remember those eyes. Too still, too focused, like someone wearing a mask of a face I recognized, but not quite knowing how to use it. Even now, I don't know what I saw. I don't throw around words like ghost easily, and I'm not someone who jumps to supernatural conclusions. I work in a hospital. I believe in medicine, in facts, in test results. But that night, I can't explain it. I can't file it away neatly in the "just a dream" folder. All I know is this. At around 4:47 a.m., in my dark, quiet room, Something was lying on the bottom bunk beside my brother, and whatever it was wearing Lena's face. So, this happened to me and my granddad Leon back in the late 80s. He'd been fishing this one lake since, I don't know, the early 60s at least. It was his place, the kind of spot you only find if someone shows you on an old paper map. The road up there was more rocks than road. You needed a beat-up 4x4 and a strong stomach just to make it in. For me, as a kid, that drive felt like it took half my life. Everything at that lake had his fingerprints on it, literally. The benches, the rickety cutting table made from 2 different trees, the old tin-roofed shelter, even the outhouse with the crooked door, that was all him. It was like his own little kingdom out in the woods. At family gatherings, he'd hold court with these stories about the lake. Tall tales, everyone called them. He'd talk about strange lights hovering over the water, weaving between the trees, and how he'd wave at them, trying to get their attention. He used to say his dream was to be picked up by a flying saucer one day. My uncles would sometimes nod along and say, "Yeah, we saw some weird stuff up there too." But there was always this feeling like maybe they were humoring him a bit. I'd been to that lake with him a handful of times. We'd had some weird moments, strange sounds at night, odd echoes across the water, but nothing truly alarming. The scariest thing I'd seen was a moose wandering a little too close to camp once. Granddad just clapped his hands, shouted, and fired a warning shot into the air, and the thing took off like it had an appointment somewhere else. Anyway, this one trip stands out. We'd already been there for 2 days. We'd set up camp, got the fire going just right. He was particular about his fires, said a good campfire was like a good handshake. It tells you the kind of person you are. That afternoon we were down by the lake, lines in the water, just that steady rhythm of casting and reeling, not saying much. It was quiet in that deep, heavy way forests sometimes are, where even the birds seemed to be listening. I got a bite, good one too. Rod bent, lines singing. I remember my hands shaking a little from the fight. I finally pulled in this beautiful, fat rainbow trout, big enough that Granddad let out this low whistle. We got it up on the old cutting table, and that's when things got weird. Right away, we both noticed the skin looked off. At first, I thought it was just the way the light was hitting it, but when I leaned in, I saw these raised patterns all over its body. Not just scars or bumps, patterns. The skin was bubbled out in these tight little lines, forming shapes that didn't look natural at all. There were spirals, perfect straight lines, little squares and triangles, shapes inside other shapes. It honestly looked like someone had etched crop circles into the side of this fish. You could run your fingers over it and feel the ridges. It wasn't just color, it was texture. I remember thinking it looked like some kind of underwater hieroglyphics. Granddad absolutely lost it, in the best way. He pointed at the fish and yelled, "You see? You see? I told you there's something about this place." He was laughing and almost crying at the same time, just overwhelmed. He kept saying, "They marked it, they marked it." And I had no idea who they were, but I knew he meant those lights he always talked about. Then, in the middle of all that excitement, he suddenly got real serious. "We gotta go," he said. "We have to take this back to town. We'll show the paper. They'll put it on the front page. People are finally gonna believe me." This was way before everybody had a phone with a camera in their pocket. If you didn't have a picture, you needed the local newspaper to vouch for you. We finally got everything loaded into the truck. The fire was out. Camp was just a flat spot again, and we were about ready to climb in and head back to town. Then Granddad paused, hand on the truck door, and said, "I want to look at it one more time." So we walked back to the ice chest, popped the lid open, and there it was, the trout. Only now, it looked completely normal. No raised lines, no spirals, No crop circle designs. Just a regular, slightly dull-looking rainbow trout lying on a bed of melting ice. I remember my whole body going cold. Granddad just stared at it. Then he looked at me and said, "You saw it, right? Tell me you saw it." His voice had this little shake to it. And I did see it. I remembered how it felt under my fingers, those ridges and shapes. I told him, "Yeah, I saw it. I swear I did." But even as I said it, there was this little voice in my head whispering, "Did you though? Did you really?" We went back and forth like that for a while. "Maybe the cold made it shrink down," he muttered. "Maybe we were just tired," I offered. Then he'd snap back with, "No, don't you start. I know what I saw." After a bit, we just kind of stood there in this weird silence, both of us doubting ourselves and each other, and also not wanting to. Eventually, he shut the lid and sighed. "Well," he said, "no one's believing that now." We ended up unpacking everything we had just packed and stayed another night. It felt ridiculous setting the tent back up in the same spot, like rewinding a tape. The mood was different though, quieter, more thoughtful. We still fished, we still cooked, we still talked, but there was this unspoken something hanging between us. The craziest part? Granddad cleaned that trout and fried it up in his old cast iron pan the next day. After all that, after the patterns and the panic and the almost trip back to town, he seasoned it like he always did, squeezed a little lemon he'd brought from home, and ate it with a grin. Said it tasted out of this world, then chuckled at his own joke. As I got older, that trip turned into one of our stories. We'd bring it up sometimes and just laugh. The way we packed up camp in a rush, the way we unpacked it all again, the way we questioned our own eyes. He'd still insist. "They marked that fish. I know they did." And I'd nod because, deep down, I kind of believed him. Later in life, he started slipping away because of dementia. Little pieces of him got lost first. Names, places, dates. Eventually, he stopped remembering the trout altogether. If I brought it up, he'd just smile politely, like I was telling him about something that had happened to someone else. But he never stopped talking about the lights. Even when most stories were gone, he'd still tell me, in this soft, almost childlike voice, about the lights over that lake. How they hung there without a sound. How the water underneath them would start to swirl like it was being stirred by an invisible spoon. His eyes would get this faraway look, and for a moment, he was right back there on the shore, watching. After that day with the trout, I stopped treating his stories like just tall tales. I don't know what we saw. I don't know why the markings vanished, or why we both remember them so clearly. I just know that, for a brief moment, it felt like we'd been let in on some kind of secret, and then it was taken back. One of these days, I'd like to go back to that lake. I don't even know if I could get there anymore. The road might be worse. The old benches probably rotted through. His handmade outhouse caved in. But I'd like to stand on that shoreline again, cast a line out, and just listen. Maybe I'd see nothing but a calm lake and some ordinary fish. Okay, deep breath. I've literally said a quick prayer before telling you this, so just know I'm not sharing it to scare you, just to be honest about what happened. So picture this. It's a rainy Friday night, and I'm at my Nana Rose's house with my best friend, Lena. We're bored out of our minds, curled up on the couch, binge-watching paranormal videos on YouTube. Those exploration channels where people sneak into abandoned hospitals and hear weird stuff through spirit boxes. And I get this brilliant, but not so brilliant idea. I turn to Lena and I'm like, "We should get a Ouija board." Now, important context. I've been obsessed with paranormal stuff since I was a kid. Ghost shows, real haunting videos, creepy forum stories. That was my jam growing up. So this wasn't some random impulse. I had wanted to try a Ouija board for years. Like, little kid me was low-key waiting for this moment. So the next day, I go out, buy one, and bring it over to my other best friend's house. Her name's Maya. So it's me, Lena, and Maya in her room, lights low, candles on the dresser, trying to act brave even though we're all a little jittery. We set the board down on the floor, sit in a little circle, fingertips on the planchette. At first, nothing happens. 10, 15 minutes of just silence and us nervously giggling because it feels stupid. I'm almost embarrassed, like, wow, guess I wasted my money. Then it starts to move. At first it's slow, like it's testing us. It spells out that it's a spirit named Henry, who supposedly lived on that property in the 1500s and died from poison. Which already didn't make a ton of sense, but we were trying to roll with it. And then, the vibe shifts. It starts spelling a name. Not its real name, but a name that instantly made my chest tighten because I recognized what it meant. I'm not going to say the real name. If you're into paranormal stuff, you probably know the one I'm talking about. But for this story, I'll call it Milo. Just know that is 100% a fake name I'm using, so I'm not actually saying it. The second the planchette spelled M-I-L-O, my heart dropped. Here's the thing. None of my friends knew anything about this specific demon. I'd learned about it when I was like 9, watching those dumb spooky videos I definitely shouldn't have been watching. It's known as the Ouija board demon in a lot of stories. The way it acts, the way it talks, there's a whole pattern to it. And I just remember thinking, there is no way they could be faking this right now. They don't even know what this is. Then it starts giving a message for Maya. Her dad had passed away a few years before, and suddenly the board spells, Dad. Message for Kayla is car. Pray for Mom. Kayla, I love you. Promise, pray for Mom. Kayla is the name I'm going to use for my friend here, instead of her real one. We all just stare at each other. Because her dad did die in a car accident, and her mom does struggle with addiction. None of that is new to us, but the board didn't know that. There was this heaviness in the room like the air got thicker. Then it spells out her ex's name. Full name. Mentions little specific details about him. Stuff we hadn't talked about that night at all. We're freaked, but of course it's my turn next. Immediately, it goes back to M-I-L-O. Then it spells out my ex's name. Again, full name. After that, it spells cry and 17. Then the board randomly says, stop talking to Eli. Eli is the fake name I'm using for the guy I was talking to back then, who, funny enough, I did end up dating later on. It spelled his name clear as day. No hesitation, no guessing. Then it switches back, spells my ex's name again, and goes, not nice. And then a really creepy pattern starts. It keeps flipping between things about my ex and the words, open door. We're in Maya's room. The bedroom door is closed. Every time we ask who we're talking to, it jumps between my ex's name, emotional words like cry, and then open door, over and over again. Like something's trying to get us to let it in. A minute later, it spells, Dad here again. We realize we're apparently talking to two entities now, Milo and her dad. And then, clear as anything, it spells, don't open door for Milo. And that's when it hits me. This thing is doing exactly what that demon is known for. It keeps pretending to be people we'd know or care about. It keeps bringing up things that matter to us. It even spells its name the same way every time, but slightly altered. One letter off here, one letter off there. Just enough to be almost the same, but not quite. I hadn't thought about that demon in years, not since I was a kid. And suddenly every video, every warning, every don't mess with this thing story is coming back to me. I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, I know exactly what this is, and I swear to you, I was not moving that planchette. I know everyone says that, but I genuinely wasn't. And my friends had no clue about any of this background. They weren't even into paranormal stuff like that. At some point, the board tells us, "Don't help demon." Maya and Lena are terrified at this point. They want to stop, say goodbye, be done. And here's the weird part. I did not want to stop. I got irrationally angry when they said they were done. That's not like me. I'm usually the cautious one. They both say goodbye and remove their fingers. I know the rule. Everyone has to say goodbye to close it properly. I know that. But something in me refuses. I keep my fingers on the planchette. I don't say goodbye. I can't explain to you why. It felt like I needed to keep going, even though I knew better. That week, everything went sideways. Within days, Maya dislocated her knee doing something super normal, nothing risky. I got horrible news back from my doctor about a health issue I had been ignoring. Kayla suddenly broke up with her boyfriend of 3 years, completely out of nowhere. Lena, who had never struggled with mental health before, spiraled into this intense depression. She said she felt like something was constantly watching her. At the time, we didn't put it all together. It just felt like a really awful week. But all of it, every single thing, happened right after we used that board. The weirdness didn't stop either. For over a month, we all had little things happen. Nightmares, knocking sounds, that feeling like someone's standing in the corner of your room when the lights are off. You know when you feel like you're not alone, but you can't prove it? It was like that, but turned up. Eventually, we were like, okay, this is not normal. We wrapped the board in an old pillowcase, took it to the house I stayed at with my grandma, and locked it in a closet. I shoved it way in the back and slammed the door. I have not opened that closet since. Here's where it gets extra creepy. She goes, "It was the strangest thing. Some kids came to the door the other day, and when I asked their names, they all gave me the same weird one. They said their name was..." And then she says the name. The actual name. Not Milo. The real one I refused to say. My stomach dropped into my shoes. There is no way she would have known that word, or known to say it to me. When I tell you I almost started crying right there at the table. After that, I reached out to a friend of mine who's a medium. I'll call her Riley. I didn't tell her much, just that something felt off and we'd messed with a Ouija board. She didn't know the details at first. She starts checking in with us one by one and later tells me she felt personally attacked, just trying to connect and figure out what was around us. She said it wasn't just passing through, it was tied to us, especially to me. That was enough. I was done. I will never touch a Ouija board again. Ever. I don't care how curious I am or how controlled it seems. I'm not saying everyone will have the same experience, but I know what happened to us, and I know how it made us feel. When we sat on that floor, all of us crying, none of us were moving that board. We were genuinely shaken. I haven't talked about this in years because, honestly, I didn't want to give it energy. I didn't want to feed into it. But I also felt like I needed to tell this story. Maybe as a warning. Maybe just to get it off my chest. So yeah, that's my Ouija story. I don't claim any negative energy from this. That spirit, that thing, whatever it was, has no power over me anymore. I've prayed, I've cleared my space, and I've moved on. If you're curious, you can look up the famous Ouija board demon and read how it behaves. The way it pretends to be familiar, how it targets your interests and soft spots, how it changes one letter in its name. It did all of that with us. Exactly. And the wildest part to me? I honestly believe it waited years for me to finally talk to it. From the moment 9-year-old me hit play on those creepy videos, to the night I finally put my fingers on that board. I'm done with it now, but I'll never forget. Okay, let me just tell this like I would if we were sitting on a porch somewhere. This happened in the summer of 2024, out in western Massachusetts, near where I live. It was one of those late July Saturdays, hot but not brutal, when the woods feel really alive. It had been a really good year for foraging. The year before, everything was just soggy and miserable. But that summer, the rain and sun actually cooperated for once. For context, my neighborhood backs right up to conservation land, so if I want to go into the woods, I don't pack up the car or anything. I literally walk out my back door, past the brush line, and I'm in it. That day, I took one of my dogs with me, my nervous one, the one who's usually kind of shy with new people. She's great off-leash though, so she was just tearing around, nose to the ground, while I poked under logs and checked fallen branches for mushrooms. We'd been out for a couple of hours and she was getting warm, tongue hanging way out, so I decided to walk us down to this little stream. It's maybe a mile or so behind my house if you follow the trail. The stream branches off from a bigger river in the area, but as long as there hasn't been a ton of recent rain, it's pretty gentle. Slow water, lots of rocks, perfect for the dog to splash around and cool off. I sat down on the bank. It was buggy, but not terrible. A few mosquitoes here and there, the usual buzzing. My dog was hopping in and out of the water, doing zoomies in the shallows. After a bit, I heard splashing from upstream. At first I thought it was my dog, but she froze, ears up, staring in the same direction. For a second my brain went straight to, oh great, this is how I meet a bear. Or maybe a moose, both of which have shown up out there before. But it wasn't an animal. It was this old guy, wading his way down the stream toward us. Now, to be fair, I have seen people back there before, but it's rare. I've lived in that house for about 7 years now, and I can count on one hand how many folks I've run into that deep in the woods. He was wearing chest waders, the kind that go up like overalls, with worn brown boots built in. Underneath, he had on this faded blue t-shirt with a goofy little sun and slogan on it. Not the exact brand I own a million of, but the same vibe. And he had a tan bucket hat on, cinched under his chin. His face was pretty red, the way somebody looks when they've been outside all day in the heat, part sunburn, part exertion. He was clearly older. His skin had that weathered, deeply lined look people get from years of being out in the elements. White beard, kind eyes. I'm sure if he'd taken the hat off, his hair would have been white too. He was old enough and moving slowly enough that I didn't get that immediate, oh no, feeling I sometimes get as a woman alone in the woods. I still had my little knife on me, and my dog, and he just didn't give off that kind of energy. If you know, you know, that automatic mental checklist we do. All of that, and still, I just didn't feel threatened. What was strange right away was my dog's reaction. Normally she's skittish with strangers. Not aggressive, just shy. She'll try to back away or keep her distance. But this guy steps closer, stretches out a hand, lets her sniff, and she just lights up. She starts bouncing around him like he's her long-lost best friend, splashing and spinning in the water. He chuckles and goes, "Don't mind me, I'm just passing through." Then he looks at me, looks at my dog doing laps through the creek, and adds with a little smile, "Looks like you're just passing through too." For some reason, that phrasing stuck in my head. And this is the part that's really hard to explain. Being near him felt safe. Not just, oh, he seems harmless, safe, but this deep, full-body calm, like my nervous system finally took a breath. I almost never feel that way around people, especially strangers alone in the woods. But with him, it was like all the background anxiety just lifted. Not only about him, but about everything, like the world itself stopped pressing on me for a minute. We didn't trade names. We didn't talk about where we lived. It was just this shared appreciation for the forest. He asked normal mushroom questions. Are you ever worried you'll eat the wrong one? How'd you get into this? What do you usually find out here? All the stuff I'm used to answering. But with him, it felt less like small talk and more like, I don't know, like he was making sure I knew what I was doing. After a while, he stopped casting and nodded downstream, in the direction he'd been heading. He said something like, "If you keep going that way, you'll see some real strange mushrooms along the waterline. They like it damp, right up near the edge. Can't say I know what they are." Then he looked at me and added, in this quiet, matter-of-fact way, "Not everything out here is meant for you, but you already look like you understand that." I didn't really know how to answer, so I just kind of stood there letting that sink in. Before it got too awkward, he followed it up with, "You care about this place. I can tell. Same way I do." I remember saying something like, "If you love something, you take care of it. That's part of the deal, right?" He gave this little nod, like I'd passed some kind of test I didn't know I was taking, and said, "Good." At some point, I had stood up and moved closer without really thinking about it. I ended up just a few feet from him at the edge of the stream. And this is the part that bothers me when I think back on it. I know better. I am very aware of stranger danger. I'm a grown adult. I know the statistics. But there was never a moment when I felt like I needed to step back, or call my dog to my side, or end the conversation. I just stayed there. I don't know how long we talked. 10 minutes? Half an hour? An hour? Time kind of melted away. It was just this old man and me, in the water, in the trees, talking about mushrooms in the forest. Then, all at once, everything changed. You know that feeling when someone hits the mute button on a TV? It was like that, but for the entire forest. 1 second, there were birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling, my dog splashing, and the next, it was gone. No birds, no cicadas, no bees, no wind, just the sound of the stream. My dog froze. Her ears went straight up, tail held high. Not growling, not bristling, just intensely alert, like every part of her was listening. I looked back at the man, and he was already looking at me. His whole demeanor shifted, not scary, not angry, just serious. Very, very serious. He said, calmly but firmly, "It's time for you to head back now." I opened my mouth to ask, back where, or why, or anything, but before I could get a word out, he repeated himself, a little more insistent this time. "It's time for you to go back now." Then he reached out and tapped me on the chest with 2 fingers, like making a peace sign and pressing the tips gently against my sternum. It wasn't a shove. It didn't feel threatening, but it landed with this weird weight, like the gesture went deeper than it should have. And then, I was standing in almost the exact same spot by the stream. My dog was a few feet away, calmly standing in the water like nothing had happened. The forest was loud again, bringing insects, the soft rush of the stream, distant leaves moving. My feet were wet, and right where he'd touched my chest, I could feel this dull ache, like a bruise forming under the skin. But he was gone. No old man in waders, no splashing footsteps downstream, no sign that he'd ever been there at all. I don't know how much time passed between him touching my chest and me coming back. It could have been seconds. It could have been longer. I checked my phone later, but there wasn't anything obvious, just that disorienting gap, like someone quietly removed a slice of my afternoon. I've told only a few people about this. The general response has been some version of, "You crossed paths with something on the other side," or "The veil was thin and you met a guardian of the forest. That kind of thing. And honestly, that's what it felt like. Not a random fisherman, not a creep, just something older, deeper, and very, very tied to that place. A couple of things people always ask, so I'll just say them now. I was completely sober. I wasn't sick before or after. I'd already eaten. I never eat anything I forage while I'm still out in the woods. I don't have any underlying medical conditions that could explain blacking out or hallucinating. And this isn't even the only strange thing that's happened to me in that forest. I don't know exactly what I believe about it. I just know that for a little while that day, I felt more at peace than I have in years. And then some old man in waders told me, very clearly, that it was time to go back. So, I've been carrying this story around for years, and I still don't really know what to make of it. I've told it a few times to friends, but I'm always curious how other people see it. Before anything, I should say English isn't my first language, so if I mess something up, please be patient with me. Anyway, here goes. When I was about 11 years old, I was in a youth scout group. It was honestly one of the happiest parts of my childhood. We spent a lot of time outdoors, learning how to tie knots, build small bamboo benches, light campfires, cook simple meals, and all that teamwork stuff that makes you feel very grown up when you're actually just a kid with a too big backpack. In my country, scout activities usually include short camping trips to quiet wooded areas. Nothing wild or far in the mountains, just small forests or nature reserves not too far from town. Peaceful places, lots of trees, crickets at night, that kind of vibe. This particular trip was at an educational nature center on the edge of a forest. The building itself was closed because it was school vacation, but they let us use the open field behind it to camp. It wasn't as big as a soccer field, more like a wide, grassy clearing. We set up our tents in a circle, tables in the middle, a campfire a bit off to one side. Our leader divided us into pairs for the tents, boys with boys, girls with girls. There were 3 girls in the group that year, me, my friend Lena, and another girl who ended up in a different tent with an assistant. So it was mostly just me and Lena together for everything. We had assigned duties. Someone handled cooking, someone gathered firewood, someone took care of the water, and so on. The one job everyone secretly hated was dishwashing, because we had to carry everything down a narrow path into the woods to a small stream. The rule was, always go in pairs, and you went with your tent mate. On the second night, we had a late dinner because one of the activities ran long. By the time we finished eating, it was close to midnight. The fire was just glowing embers, and everyone was tired and quiet. That night, it was my turn and Lena's turn to wash the dishes. But Lena had caught a bad cold earlier that day. She was pale, shivering, and had that heavy, blocked nose kind of voice. Our leader, Mr. Rafi, saw her and said, "No, you stay and rest. I'll send someone else with you," meaning with me. So instead of Lena, one of the boys came with me. I'll call him Jonah. He grabbed the plastic tub with the dirty plates and cups, and I took the flashlight. We didn't really talk much. We were just sleepy and a bit annoyed that we got the worst chore at the worst time. To reach the stream, there was only one way. A thin dirt trail that went between the trees behind the field. In the daytime, it was kind of pretty, with sunlight coming through the leaves. At night, though, it felt completely different. It was really dark, and the only lights were my little flashlight and a small slice of moon peeking through the branches. The path was just wide enough for one person at a time, so Jonah walked behind me, carrying the dishes, and I walked in front with the flashlight. We followed the trail for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, long enough for my heart to start beating a bit faster than usual. The air felt colder down there, damp from the stream. I could hear the water before I saw it. When we finally reached the stream, I lifted the flashlight to see where we could put the tub down. That's when we noticed someone was already standing there. For a moment, we both assumed it was someone from our group, but that didn't really make sense. Everyone should have been in their tents, and we hadn't seen anyone else leave the campsite. I remember Jonah whispering, "Who's that?" I didn't answer. I just squinted, trying to see better. I raised the flashlight a little, and my stomach dropped. The girl was wearing what looked like Lena's clothes, an oversized gray hoodie and dark shorts. Lena had been wearing that exact outfit earlier that evening, right before she went to lie down. My first thought was, Lena got up and came here? But that didn't make sense either. She'd been really sick, and we had left the campsite before seeing anyone else even sit up, let alone walk past us. We stood there, both of us staring at this girl across the stream. She had her back to us, hair down, almost reaching the middle of her back. She wasn't making any sound, just standing, looking at the water. Because we were kids, and kids don't always make smart decisions, we decided to call out to her instead of turning around and leaving. "Lena?" I called softly at first. No response. She didn't move at all. I tried again, louder. "Lena, are you okay?" Still nothing. Not even a flinch. At this point, I remember feeling two things at the same time: fear and this strange politeness. Like, what if this really is Lena and she needs help? I didn't want to just abandon her, but everything in me was starting to feel wrong. Jonah leaned a little closer to me and whispered, "Why isn't she answering?" We waited maybe 5, 6 seconds. It felt longer. The only sound was the stream and crickets. Then, for some reason I still don't fully understand, we decided to get closer. The stream wasn't very wide there, just a narrow crossing with rocks, and we were both used to going around that area during the day. So we carefully stepped on a couple of big stones to get closer to her side. My flashlight beam shook a bit because my hands were starting to tremble. We walked up behind her, slowly. She still didn't react. No turning, no shifting her weight, no sound. Just this small figure in Lena's hoodie, staring at the water. Jonah reached out first. I remember wanting to tell him, "Don't," but the word never came out of my mouth. He put his hand very gently on her shoulder and turned her slightly toward us. At the same time, I lifted the flashlight to her face. And that's the moment everything broke. Where her face should have been, there was just nothing clear. It was like my brain couldn't focus on it. I didn't see eyes, or a nose, or a mouth. Just a kind of pale blankness where all those things should be. It wasn't like someone wearing a mask. It didn't look plasticky or painted. It was more like my brain refused to make sense of what I was seeing. I remember feeling this cold wave run through my whole body in less than a second. Jonah made this noise, half gasp, half choke, and yanked his hand back. I couldn't even scream at first. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. The girl didn't move. She didn't react to him touching her or to the light in her face. She didn't tilt her head, didn't step back, didn't say a single word. She was just standing there, slightly turned toward us now, with that face, or non-face, in the beam of my flashlight. Then everything happened at once. I dropped the flashlight. Jonah dropped the tub with all the dishes, and they clattered on the rocks and splashed into the water. In that moment of chaos, my voice finally came back, and I screamed. I think we were both screaming, honestly. When we burst out of the trees and into the camp, a couple of kids sat up, confused, and our leader came running toward us, asking what happened. We were shaking so badly we could barely talk. The first thing I did was sprint straight to my tent and yank the flap open. Lena was there, sound asleep, curled up in her sleeping bag, breathing heavily through her stuffy nose. Her hair was a mess on the pillow, and her hoodie, the same gray hoodie, was right there on her. I just stood there, staring at her. I remember touching her shoulder gently and whispering her name, and she only groaned a little and turned over, still half asleep. The cold feeling in my chest got even worse. If she had been in the tent the whole time, who had we just followed into the woods? I went back to where Jonah was standing with our leader. He looked terrible, white as a sheet, eyes wide, hands still shaking. We tried to explain what we'd seen, stumbling over our words, interrupting each other. Our leader was skeptical, of course. From his perspective, it was two scared kids telling a ghost story after midnight. He scolded us for making such a scene and for dropping all the dishes in the stream. Then he told us we had to go back and pick them up. I did not want to go. Neither did Jonah. But we also didn't want to get into more trouble. So after a lot of deep breaths and nervous glances, we agreed to go, this time with our leader coming along behind us. Walking that same path again, so soon after, was horrible. Every shadow looked like it was about to move. I kept expecting to see that small figure standing in the distance again. My hands were clammy on the flashlight. When we reached the stream, everything was exactly like we'd left it, except there was no one there. No girl, no movement, just the sound of water and insects. The tub was overturned near the bank. Some of the dishes were half in the water, some on the rocks. We picked them up in silence. I kept shining the flashlight around, half hoping, half terrified I would see someone hiding in the trees. But there was nothing. No footprints, no rustling, no sign of anyone else. Our leader grumbled about us scaring ourselves, and on the way back, he insisted it was probably a trick of the light, or maybe we were confusing each other's stories in the moment. You know, the usual adult explanations. For a long time, among our scout friends, this story turned into something people joked about. Remember when you and Jonah screamed about a faceless girl? They'd laugh, or say we'd watched too many horror movies. And I get it. If I hadn't been there, I might think the same thing. But here's what still bothers me. We both saw the same thing, at the same time, before we had a chance to influence each other's memories. Jonah and I didn't describe it differently. We both said it looked like a girl wearing clothes like Lena's, standing by the water, not moving, and that when we saw her face, there was nothing. We were kids, yes, but we weren't trying to scare each other. If anything, we were trying very hard not to be scared. I'm not as frightened by it anymore. It's been many years, and I can talk about it without my voice shaking. I can come up with all kinds of maybe explanations now. Maybe it was some stranger living nearby. Maybe it really was a mask, and we just panicked too much to notice details. Maybe the flashlight's angle and the shadows erased everything in a weird optical illusion. Maybe our brains just filled in the blanks with something terrifying. All of those are possible, I guess. But whenever I think back to that night, what unnerves me the most isn't the blank face. It's the way she never moved. Not even a little. Not when we called out. Not when we stepped onto the rocks. Not when Jonah touched her shoulder and turned her. I still don't know what we really saw that night by the stream. And maybe I never will. But it stayed with me, clear as the sound of the water and the cold in the air, all these years later. So, let me tell you about the strangest job I've ever had. Last year, I was working as a compounding pharmacy intern. It was my very first time working in a real lab, and I was honestly so excited. You know that mix of nerves and pride? That was me, in my little white coat, thinking, wow, I'm really doing it. If you're not familiar, a compounding pharmacy is where they make customized medications, like tailored doses, different forms, special ingredients, very specific to each patient. My job wasn't glamorous or anything. I mostly bottled the medications, labeled them, checked the tags. Basic stuff. But for a first experience, I thought it would be great. I got the job because a friend of mine, Julia, recommended me. She was like, You'll learn a lot, and the boss is chill. So I trusted her. The work itself was fine. The place, though? The place was wrong. The pharmacy was in this old 2-story building on a quiet street. From the outside, it looked more like someone's grandmother's house than a lab. It had that faded paint, narrow windows, and this tiny, squeaky gate. When I first saw it, I remember thinking, are we sure this is up to code? But I was an intern, so, I kept that to myself. Inside, it felt like they had taken a normal family home and just forced it into being a pharmacy. The front, where the customers came in, was okay. But the back area? A chaos of boxes, old shelves, and patches of mold creeping along the walls. The smell of damp plaster never really went away. To get to the lab, you had to go up this narrow wooden staircase. Every step complained. I swear, it sounded exactly like the stairs in horror movies, those groans and pops that make you look over your shoulder even when you know no one's there. And then there was the last step. I started calling it the ghost step in my head. Every time I walked down the stairs, it felt like that last step wasn't really there, like my foot just dropped a little too far. I'd stumble, catch myself, and my heart would leap into my throat. It happened so often that it stopped feeling like clumsiness and started feeling like something was waiting for me to miss. The whole building had strange details like that. There were multiple doors that went nowhere. One was screwed shut. Another was blocked by a tall shelf full of dusty binders. Another opened into a wall that had clearly been built later. It was like the house had a layout once, a normal one, and then somebody decided to mutilate it. Upstairs, the lab itself was divided into several small rooms. One for capsules, one for creams and gels, one with the big machines, and a storage room. All of them were connected by this long, narrow corridor that was always darker than it should have been, even with the lights on. Light just didn't seem to stick to that hallway. And the people, well, let's just say they weren't the comforting kind. Most of the staff were polite on the surface, but very cold underneath. You know those coworkers who never actually help, but always complain? A lot of that. Very selfish energy. Everyone doing the bare minimum, always watching each other, but never really seeing each other. Now, here's an important detail. I was almost always the last one to leave the lab. At first, nothing super strange happened. The place creeped me out, but it was just a vibe. You know when you feel uneasy, but you can still explain it away? Old building, dark hallway, weird mold, unfriendly coworkers. Okay, fine. But a few months in, that changed. There was this guy who worked the shift before mine. Let's call him Paolo. He wasn't friendly, but he wasn't rude either. Just quiet, very serious. Every day when he finished, he'd pass by the doorway, look in, and say a simple, "Ciao," or "See you." Then he'd go down the stairs, and I'd hear his steps fading away. One evening, around a little after 6 p.m., I was alone in one of the smaller rooms. Door closed, finishing some labels. It was one of those evenings when the sky outside turns this grayish blue, and you can't really tell how late it is. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, steady, coming up. Wood creaking under each step. My first thought was, oh, Paolo forgot something. So I called out, "Paolo, is that you?" Silence. The footsteps kept coming. Up the stairs, onto the hallway, past the door of the room I was in. They didn't stop. They just moved through the lab. No voices, no doors opening, nothing falling, no bags rustling. Just the sound of someone walking. You know that cold feeling that starts in your chest and spreads to your fingers? Yeah, that. I didn't open the door. I just froze. I held my breath and listened, hoping weirdly that I was wrong, that it was just the building creaking. But it wasn't. They were footsteps, heavy enough to make the wood respond. Eventually, the sound faded, and I forced myself to go downstairs and ask my boss, Ricardo, if he'd been up there. He looked surprised and said, "No, I've been here at the counter the whole time. Why?" I just laughed it off. Nothing. I thought I heard someone." Inside, though, I was rattled. After that day, things escalated. It became normal, too normal, for me to hear footsteps or soft whispers when I was alone in erupts. The whispers were the worst, because I could never quite make out the words. It was like standing next to a closed room where two people are talking very quietly. You can't hear what, but you know there are voices. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. That's when I began wearing headphones with music. It was against the rules because of biosecurity, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. Fear felt worse than getting scolded. I'd tuck one earbud under my hair, keep the volume low, and pretend everything was fine. But even with music, the feeling of the place wouldn't leave me. The air felt heavy, like something was pressing on my chest. Those blocked doors, the moldy corners, the way people treated each other. Everything combined into this thick, bad energy. I'd go up the stairs already tense, shoulders tight, stomach knotted. And then my health started to fall apart. I stopped being able to eat properly. I'd sit down for lunch and feel nauseous just looking at the food. My stomach was always weird, painful, swollen, full of gas. And I spent more time in the bathroom holding back the urge to vomit than actually working. I lost a lot of weight without trying. My clothes became loose. I went to doctors, did tests, tried medications. Everything came back normal. On paper, I was fine. In reality, I felt miserable. One afternoon, something happened that I still think about. Not a little bump. A thud. My whole body went cold. I stood there for a few seconds just breathing, arguing with myself. Don't go. But what if something actually fell? What if it's important? Finally, I forced myself to open the door. The hallway looked the same. Dim, long, weird. I walked to the other room, and there, in the middle of the floor, was a wooden stool lying on its side. One of those simple, round stools with 4 legs and no backrest. Now, there was no open window, no fan. No one had been up there but me, and that stool was heavy. It wasn't the kind of thing a tiny breeze could knock over. I remember just staring at it, feeling this wave of adrenaline. I walked in, picked it up, and put it back the right way. And as I turned to leave the room, I glanced toward the corridor. That's when I saw it. A white shape, small, about the height of a child, moving quickly across the hallway. Just a pale figure passing from one side to the other, then gone. No face, no details, just that white form against the darkness. I didn't stay to negotiate with reality. I dropped what I had in my hands and bolted. I ran down the stairs so fast that, of course, the ghost step got me. My foot slipped on that last step that always felt wrong, and I stumbled hard, almost falling. Ricardo, my boss, came rushing over. "What happened? Are you okay?" I laughed it off again, said something about being clumsy, changed the subject as fast as I could. I was shaking, but I still didn't want to sound crazy. Later, when I'd calmed down a bit, curiosity beat fear. I asked him, "Hey, what was this building before it became a pharmacy?" He thought for a moment and said, "Oh, it used to be a house. An older couple lived here, and I think they had a granddaughter who stayed with them sometimes. That was, what, 20 years ago?" Then he hesitated and added, almost casually, "Funny thing, I had a dream about a girl in this place once. She was wearing white. She kept trying to talk to me, but I couldn't understand her. And her eyes..." He paused. Her eyes were completely black. Hearing that, I felt every little hair on my arm stand up. I told him about the footsteps, the stool, the white figure I'd just seen. I expected him to laugh or tell me I was overworked. Instead, he sighed and said, "You're not the first person to say something like that." He told me the pharmacist who used to be in charge, let's call her Louisa, had once seen a child walking around the pharmacy, a little girl. Louisa got so terrified she hid under a table and had a full-blown panic attack. They ended up having to take her out and drive her to the hospital. She resigned not long after that. After hearing all of this, I refused to stay alone upstairs anymore. I asked my friend Julia to stay with me whenever she could, even if she wasn't on the same schedule. On days when that wasn't possible, I'd rush through my tasks and then literally hide in the bathroom downstairs until my shift ended, just so I didn't have to be alone in that lab. The whole thing just felt wrong. Not, I watched a horror movie and I'm jumpy, wrong. More like, my body is screaming at me to leave, wrong. After almost a year there, I finally had a reason to quit. My college schedule changed to full-time, and there was no way to keep the internship. I told them I had to leave, and honestly, I felt relieved in a way that's hard to describe. Here's the part that still blows my mind. In the first week after I left that pharmacy, my appetite just came back. No nausea, no constant stomach pain, no running to the bathroom. It was like my body had been holding its breath the entire time I worked there, and finally, it could inhale again. Let's just say I'm very, very happy to be far away from that pharmacy on the hill. And if anyone ever invites you to work in an old house that's suspiciously cheap to rent and full of doors that go nowhere, maybe politely say no. So, before I jump in, let me set the scene for you. When all of this happened, I was still living in my childhood home. I don't live there anymore. I actually moved across town a couple years back. But this was the house my family built from the ground up. Fresh plot of land, no previous owners, no dark history anyone knew about. No ancient burial ground, no tragic deaths, nothing like that. Just a regular house at the end of a quiet street. At least, that's what we thought. The whole thing really starts with my Aunt Rosa. She loves flipping other people's junk for fun and profit. Storage units, flea markets, estate sales. If there's a dusty corner with someone's forgotten stuff in it, she's probably already been there. One weekend I went with her to help empty out a storage unit she'd just bought. We're hauling boxes and lamps and all kinds of random things, and tucked in the back, I see this glider chair. Not super old, but kind of vintage looking, with that smooth rocking motion I remembered from my grandparents' place. They had one when I was a kid, and I used to sit in it for hours, just zoning out. So I'm like, hey, can I have this one? And she shrugs and says, if you can fit it in your car, it's yours. I got it home that day, set it up in the corner of my room, and for a while, nothing happened. Just a comfy chair. I'd sit in it, scroll my phone, play games, no weird vibes at all. At first. Back then, my schedule was pretty brutal. I'd leave early, come back wiped out in the afternoon, and crash for a nap. It was usually around 1 or 2 p.m. when I'd lie down. My bedroom was upstairs, right by this little balcony that overlooked the living room, so I could always hear the TV or people talking downstairs if someone was home. One afternoon, I came home, dropped my stuff, and flopped onto my bed. Door open, TV murmuring faintly from the living room. Nothing out of the ordinary. I fell asleep almost immediately. At some point, I woke up to this sound. It was the very specific noise of footsteps, like 3 quick shuffles right at the foot of my bed. Shh, shh, shh. Not the creaking of the house, not the TV. This felt close, like someone had walked right up to me. I sat straight up. Nobody was there. So I'm trying to be logical. Okay, maybe it was just the TV. Maybe I was half dreaming. Maybe my brain stitched together some sounds. I brushed it off, told myself not to be dramatic, rolled over, and went back to sleep. 2 days later, it happened again. Same deal. Afternoon nap, this time with my bedroom door closed. No TV, no one else in the house. I wake up to that same pattern of steps. Shh, shh, shh. Right at the foot of my bed. I snapped awake, heart pounding. Door still shut. house completely quiet. And I remember thinking, okay, that's weird. After that, the footsteps stopped for a bit, and I thought maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me. A few days of silence. I'm starting to relax. Then the clicking starts. One night, I'm lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and I hear this faint click, click, click. My first thought is that my mouse? My computer's on my desk across the room, so I roll over and look. No lights moving, no cursor, nothing. So I shrug it off. I turn back over. Click, 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 click. This went on every night. Some nights I could fix it temporarily by rolling over to face the computer. Other nights I did the classic pillow over the head move and tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But the clicking would come back. Always. For the record, I'm not gullible. I took the mouse apart, shook it, checked for loose parts, dust, bugs, anything. I even swapped it out once for a different mouse just to see if it would stop. It didn't. One night, desperate to prove to myself I was just losing it, I covered the mouse with a folded t-shirt. Completely covered it. I remember standing there thinking, I am officially insane for doing this. I got back in bed. A little while later, I hear it again, but this time, it's muffled. That same clicking, but as if it were happening under a layer of fabric, coming from the direction of my desk. That was the first time I felt that drop in my stomach. Like, oh, this might actually not be in my head. Eventually, my girlfriend at the time, let's call her Lily, started staying over more often. And one night, around 2 a.m., she nudges me awake and goes, "Babe, what is that clicking sound?" I'm half asleep and I mumble, "Oh, that's just the ghost that clicks my mouse." Then I froze. You hear it too?" She stares at me wide-eyed. "Yes, it's driving me nuts." That was the moment I realized, okay, this isn't just some private, sleep-deprived hallucination. Someone else is hearing it as clearly as I am. By this point, the clicking had become almost familiar. I started talking to whatever it was. I'd come home, open my bedroom door, and say, "Hey, I'm back. Please don't keep me up tonight." Crossing that threshold into my room always felt a little off. Not icy cold or horror movie dramatic, just heavy. Like walking into a closet packed tight with winter coats. The sound from the rest of the house always seemed to dull in there. Too quiet. A few weeks of this go by. The footsteps, the relentless clicking, the weird heaviness when I walked into my room. I tried to outsmart it by staying up late, gaming until I was so exhausted I'd fall asleep despite the noise. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the absolute worst sound you can hear in the South in the middle of summer. Silence. The power had gone out. No AC, no fan. Just dead, sticky air and that thick humidity that feels like it's sitting on your chest. I'm sweating, uncomfortable, trying to flip my pillow over to the cool side that doesn't exist anymore. And suddenly I notice the clicking has stopped. It's completely silent. I'm lying on my side, facing away from the computer, one arm out, the other under my pillow, just staring into the dark. Then I feel it. This soft, slow sweep of cold air across my bare shoulder. Not like a draft from the window, not with the power out and the air totally still. This felt like a hand. Like someone had reached out and slowly dragged their fingers through the space my shoulder occupied. I lay there, absolutely frozen. My whole body was hot and sweaty, except for that one line of icy sensation across my skin. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I finally told my family everything. The footsteps, the clicking, the cold breeze across my shoulder, all of it. My dad, his name's Mark, is a hardcore skeptic. He immediately started in with his list: house settling, loose wiring, electrical interference, maybe a bug inside the mouse. Maybe I'd been dreaming it. Maybe it was the TV. Maybe it was pipes in the wall. Maybe neighbors, you name it. He started telling my aunts and uncles about it as a joke, like, "Guess what my kid thinks is haunting their bedroom? A computer mouse." I didn't really blame him. Out loud, it sounded ridiculous. After the cold shoulder incident, though, I reached my limit. I went out and bought a small security camera, the kind that uploads clips to your phone, and pointed it at the corner of my room where the desk and chair were. I wanted to see if the sound happened when I wasn't home, or if anything actually moved. Was that extreme? Maybe, but I needed to know. Right around then, we decided to repaint part of the house. The painters came in and started with the living room downstairs. They covered the tile in those thick layers of paper, the kind that crinkles so loud you couldn't sneak across it if you tried. They moved all the furniture out, hauled in ladders and paint trays, and got a good chunk done on the first day. By evening, there was scaffolding set up, rollers stacked in corners, and one of those tall aluminum A-frame ladders left open near the far wall. The work area looked like a construction zone, but it was all neatly arranged. That night, for once, I wasn't trying to sleep. I was at my desk upstairs, headset on, laughing and talking with some friends online. It was around midnight. Out of nowhere, from the living room directly below my room, I hear this deafening slam. Not a knock, not something falling over gently. It was the kind of sound that makes your heart jump into your throat, like metal hitting the floor hard. I ripped my headset off and bolted out of my room. At the same time, my dad's bedroom door downstairs flew open. His room is right off the living room. I got to the balcony railing and looked down. He was already standing in the middle of the paper-covered floor, scanning the room. Paint cans, trays, scaffolding, everything still in place. No obvious disaster. He looked up at me, and I looked down at him. We both knew, instantly, that neither of us had made that sound. I watched the color drain from his face. He said, very quietly, "Okay, I believe you now." We spent the next 20 minutes playing detective. We started testing things, moving them, bumping them, trying to recreate that exact noise. At first, everything either scraped or thudded or clanged, but nothing matched. Then we got to this tall aluminum ladder, probably around 8 feet, that had been left open in the middle of the room. My dad picked it up a few inches off the floor and let it drop. Slam. Both of us froze. That was the sound. Perfectly. Except neither of us had touched that ladder when the noise first happened, and nobody else was awake. My dad just stood there, staring at it, and then he looked at me and said, "If something wanted my attention, it's got it." Eventually, the house got finished, the ladder went away, the living room looked normal again. The clicking in my room slowly faded and then stopped. I moved out not too long after. I don't know if it was the chair, the repainting, some weird coincidence, or something that just wanted to be acknowledged for a bit. I never saw anything, never caught a great clip on the camera, no dramatic horror movie moment. But I'll tell you this. To this day, if a computer mouse starts randomly clicking on its own, I still get that same little chill down my shoulder. And I can hear my dad's voice in my head saying, "Okay, I believe you now."